the sovereign of the desolate sands. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 326, Towering. Duanli has a dry climate with little rain. During the reign of the third king of Huayang, a giant granary named Wei was built in the city. It was not the best in Dahua, but it was second only to the Lanshan warehouse in the capital of Huayang. Wei warehouse is not really that majestic. It is surrounded by high white walls, with only sparse sentries at the front and back doors. Inside is a flat square that is 200 meters long and 100 meters wide, slightly above the ground and covered with rain canopies. In the early morning, when Hong Fan first found the place, he wondered why such an important place was not strictly protected. After climbing over the wall, he understood. On the square, the grain storage is more suitable to be called a cellar than a warehouse. A circular cylinder-shaped space is dug from the surface, with a diameter of between 12 meters and 8 meters from large to small, and covered with thick soil. This is not a place where ordinary people can steal. There are a total of 22 sealed circular warehouses and cellars. Only the 23rd one is empty. Hong Fan came over silently and heard voices coming from under the granary. When the earthen wall is baked thoroughly by fire and then cooled, and there is no crack, the cellar is ready. At the deepest part more than 10 meters below, a gray-haired old craftsman was explaining to two apprentices. First spread the ash at the bottom, at least 1 hand thick, and then lay the wooden boards, put a layer of insulation on the wooden boards, a layer of rice bran between 2 layers of mats. I taught you before. He stepped on the broken charcoal and bent down to demonstrate. The same is true for the cellar wall. After the insulation is all laid and compacted, put grain in the middle until it is full. Finally, cover the top with straw mats and rice bran, and seal it with 2 feet of soil. If you are experienced, storing grain for 10 years without spoiling is an understatement. After the old master finished speaking, he wiped off the charcoal black from his feet and climbed up the ladder to the ground. At this time, he remembered something and instructed the apprentice in the cellar. Don't forget, for the cellar that will not be sealed for a few years, you have to plant a small tree in the soil. As soon as he finished speaking, a young voice behind him asked, "What's the point of planting a small tree? Haven't I told you several times? If the grain sprouts or deteriorates, it will generate heat, and the tree will wither and turn yellow when the temperature rises." Halfway through his words, the old master's heart skipped a beat and he realized, "No, who are you?" As soon as he turned around, he was grabbed by 5 fingers like iron clamps on his shoulders and couldn't move. Just by the strength, the old man knew that he had met a strong man. The 2 disciples heard the stranger's voice and immediately wanted to climb up the ladder, but were stopped by their master in a hurry. "This young man looks so kind. I guess he won't make things difficult for me. If you have anything to ask, just ask. I will tell you everything I know," the old man said softly. Hong Fan would not embarrass him, and asked directly, "How much grain is there here in total?" "There are 22 granaries in Wei Granary. The big one is 40 feet deep and can store more than 10,000 shi of grain. The small one is 20 feet deep and can store thousands of shi of grain." The old master answered immediately. "The current total grain storage is 300,000 shi, which is almost enough for 100,000 people to eat for a year." Hong Fan frowned, obviously thinking it was too little. Huayang state suffered from many disasters and the harvest was unstable. Only enough for 100,000 people for a year? "But I don't think Duanli City is short of food," he questioned. "Young man, it's really a lot," the old man explained. "The Wei warehouse is full of deep pits and large cellars, which are not easily opened. The grain stored here usually increases but never decreases. It is either used to resist disasters or as military rations. It is different from the daily consumption of the people. In addition to this, there are 2 small grain cellars and ground warehouses in the southeast of the city. In addition to the official warehouse, every family in Duanli City, from the nobles to the common people, has stored grain." "Young man, who doesn't know that food is more valuable than gold in this year?" Counting the hoarding of merchants' private warehouses, the total grain storage is at least 5 times that of the Wei warehouse. It is now early July and the rice harvest has not yet arrived. This number is definitely not a small amount at this time of year. Hong Fan's mind turned and he was relieved a little. Without food, warriors can't transform. If there's only a problem with distribution, there's always a way to think of a solution. Duanli City obviously has so much stored grain, but it sits and watches the counties and towns suffer so much, he scolded. His tone was harsh. The old man didn't know how to respond. What? Hong Fan was impatient. Young man, these grains were originally moved from the counties and towns below. The old man lowered his voice and used the softest word move. But Hong Fan still found it harsh. His cheeks were tense and he couldn't hold back his anger. When the old master saw this, he fell to his knees. Young man, my hair and beard are all white, and I can live for 2 years, but my 2 disciples have been downstairs and have never seen your face. Please let them go, the old man kowtowed and begged. Hong Fan was stunned. He was a warrior at the peak of the strength realm. At this time, he could hear the gritting of teeth and wiping of tears under the granary clearly. Old man, I am not a bad person, Hong Fan whispered, and his first reaction was to explain. But he immediately realized that he had just lost his temper in front of the weak, and felt ashamed. Finally, the sound of gnashing teeth stopped. Someone stepped on the long ladder in the granary, and it creaked. The old master was shocked and angry and wanted to say something, but he saw the young man in front of him put down 2 taels of silver as an apology and ran away. After leaving the wee warehouse, Hong Fan still had mixed feelings. He found that he was duller than before. The former Hong Fan was sharp-minded, and he could see what others thought, like watching the night fire. The reason is not difficult to imagine, because I am on the Xianjiao list. It has only been 3 months since he defeated Su Pifeng, and the swarm of praise and the world's fame have made him arrogant. So much so that he would look down on everything he saw first, and unconsciously sat in the position of the blue sky. Hong Fan sighed silently and warned himself deeply. Turning the corner, he looked up and saw an acquaintance. Under the eaves of the street, a beggar was wearing a familiar black cloak, and it was the one from yesterday. He probably lost to his fellow man with a broken leg in the decisive battle, and not only did he lose his territory, but he also lost his pig bones. Seeing Hong Fan, the beggar could still smile. Young man, see you again. The beggar raised his head and patted his cloak, shaking up a large cloud of dust. Young man is not a respectful title, but it seems intimate. Hong Fan was inexplicably happy to hear this. He smiled back, took out a few silver coins, and gently placed them in the beggar's rough iron palm. You are a very nice person, the cloaked beggar praised. Hong Fan shook his head. I can only say that you are not bad. Then, he followed the noise and joined the crowd. On the same day, an hour or so passed. The sun was about to reach the middle of the sky. The open space at the entrance of Duanli City Street was exposed and widened by the sun. The wooden platform in the middle had a new guest today. A man with many bandages tied up with iron chains stood alone in the center of the platform. On the low frame outside the wooden platform, his double swords and bamboo hat were hung. Identification: double swords running thunder Wu Yuan. Under the rain eaves opposite the high platform, the city judge of Duanli City said loudly. A native of Hanzhou, he has achieved a spiritual connection with heaven and man. On June 30th, the 29th year of Zheng, he teamed up with Wen Cage, Zheyun, and Qin Zhezhang to assassinate the county lieutenant of Heiyu County. After discussion by the city judge of Duanli City and the Qianmei and Feng Wuwei, the sentence is to be executed immediately. Today at noon, he will be executed. Chapter 327, Insight into the Heart. In Duanli City, killing is not a new thing, and it is not worth a resident's time to come and see it. But the street entrance is a place with a lot of people. Near noon, the crowd half-blocked the road. On the execution platform, the city judge who sat in the middle called his subordinates. Soon, 200 elite archers wearing light armor and short swords lined up to form a wall to clear the road. The time was soon up. The city judge shouted. The executioner with a naked upper body and a red scarf on his head went up to the platform. He glanced at Wu Yuan, sat down in front of the grindstone brought by the apprentice, and sharpened the knife in front of him. Sharpening the knife is an inherent ritual before execution. The first is to the prisoner and set an example, and the second is to make sure to make a clean break and show mercy. Of course, the ghost-headed sword had been sharpened in advance. The executioner pretended for a while, and when he saw that the atmosphere was right, he picked up the knife and prepared to execute. According to convention, the prisoner should kneel down first. However, Wu Yuan stared at the execution platform opposite and refused to kneel. The executioner gave his assistant a look. The latter was also a 200 jin strong man. He came up and kicked Wu Yuan in the knee. But even though he was extremely strong among mortals, how could he kick a warrior? The second executioner, under the scorching sun, kicked back and forth a few times and was sweating profusely, but Wu Yuan still stood. The executioner had to turn his head to look at the city judge. The city judge looked at Tang Xingqing. But she didn't care at all and stared at Wu Yuan without blinking. In this way, the execution team could only think of a way on their own. They first took out the iron chain to lock Wu Yuan's ankles on the wooden platform. Then they used the draft horse to tie his knees with hemp rope. The whip hit the horse's 3 wheels and the stick hit his thighs, and Wu Yuan finally knelt down. The street entrance was silent. Even the spectators were stunned. There was a sudden knock. It was Tang Xingqing who put down her teacup. Wu Yuan, are you convinced? She stroked the sword box on her knees and asked with a smile. I don't accept it, Wu Yuan shouted back. I am acting on behalf of heaven, following the will of heaven and following virtue. I have nothing to accept. There was a clanging sound on his body. He was about to stand up, but was held down again. Tang Xingqing shook her head and sneered. Foolish fellow, don't you understand? Whether you plead guilty or not, you will die today. Whether you are willing to kneel or not, kneel now. She stood up, curling her long hair with her right index finger. Wu Yuan, I respect your toughness, but no matter how tough a person's words are, they are not as tough as a sword. The voice was as clear as stone. His eyes swept across, and people's hearts were bent. Wu Yuan stopped talking. Tang Xingqing sat back. The executioner raised the big knife. At this time, people's voices shouted from a distance on the long street, approaching all the way. No one on the execution stand was surprised. The case at the end of June was only a dozen days away. Speeding up the procedure, releasing the news, and choosing the execution side in an open place. All of this was done to lure back the 3 people who had been released that day. Even more people. 200 soldiers drew their swords, and those far away raised their bows. 10,000 faces went realm strongmen directly under the Wu Wei jumped off the execution platform. Chaos came along the street. It was not people who came, but horses. Dozens of horses gathered into a herd, dragging branches behind their tails and running. These branches were poured with oil and burned. What's worse is that many people who were watching the excitement were also dragged into the front of the archers, disrupting the organization. The executioner was an experienced one. Seeing someone robbing the execution ground, he immediately put down his sword to avoid being affected. The city judge was at a loss and dared not give orders. When the herd rushed to the wooden platform, 3 figures climbed up from the roofs of the houses beside the street and strode along the ridges. The 1,000 faces wind strongmen who were watching the horses entering the battle moved at the same time. But the knights were prepared and threw fist-sized hidden weapons. Amid the sound of earthenware jars shattering, black smoke exploded. It's poisonous, be careful, the strong man whistled to warn and was forced to retreat. The delay allowed the 3 of them to go up to the platform. It's better not to come at this time, Wu Yuan complained, happy and angry. Today's scene, even a pig would know it's a trap. You are coming to rob the execution ground now. It's better than robbing the prison 2 days ago. As soon as he finished speaking, a gourd was stuffed into his mouth. There was water in the gourd, which was very bitter. Wu Yuan knew that this was probably the antidote for the paralysis smoke. Brother Wu asked for too much. The youngest of the 4 took back the gourd and laughed. Then, the oldest man stepped forward. We didn't want to come today, but to save people in Duanli City, we have to prepare in advance. As he spoke, he chopped the sword continuously, using the innate gold spirit as the blade, and cut the fine steel chain neatly. The 3rd man took back the double swords and bamboo hat and handed them over. We have left 4 horses behind the house in the northeast, and we will leave from there later, he whispered and hadn't explained halfway when he heard the sword whistling in the black smoke behind him. 1,000-point star, Wu Yuan pressed his bamboo hat against his head and drew his sword. Sparks exploded on the silver light track. The other 3 looked at each other, each in order. They took out several round black balls from their waists, ignited the fuses with a fire element true key, and threw them out in a fan shape. Brother Wu, the mother and child thundershock, the voice was low. With tacit understanding, Wu Yuan immediately understood his companion's intentions, explode and leave. However, a breath passed, only the sword whistled, but the mother and child thundershock did not sound. A sharper wind sound came immediately. 3 iron sounds in an instant. Did you buy a fake? The older knight straightened his long sword and said angrily. But the short sword that had just been chopped off pierced through the smoke wall again and turned back accurately. The four no longer had time to chat. Fear rose in their hearts. Can she see the 1,000-point star? Wu Yuan's words were difficult. I can. The proud female voice pierced through the fog like a sword. Wu Yuan, Wen Cage, Jeyun, Qin Zhen. The four were forced to stay where they were by the four short swords. The smoke gradually dissipated, submerging the high platform, and became a constraint on their own vision. My heart is clear, every detail is clear. Qin Zhen, the youngest, who only had 3 meridians, was cut in the side and was the first to be injured. He was forced to defend back-to-back with Wu Yuan, who had difficulty in running. Tang Xingqing, have you cultivated the heart eye? Wu Yuan shouted. He was responded with a smug chuckle. Wu Yuan, you should know now that I didn't brag that day. The clear heart eye of 1,000 silk thoughts was originally a killing method that could only be practiced in the key realm. I understood it in the realm of heaven and man, because I have never used it before today. Ji Xianji naturally couldn't know it. The voice rose, shaking the roof tiles. So I said, the ranking of the 3 lists is not accurate, you are just following the crowd. The smoke seemed to be dispersed. Under the high platform, the 1,000-faced wind warriors surrounded them. In the distance, archers formed a formation, drawing their bowstrings and ready to fire. Several mother and child thunder bombs with their fuses cut off were scattered on the street. With her bare hands, she formed a seal. The helpless short sword suddenly dispersed, turning into 4 sharp white rainbows. Within 3 breaths, all the horses within a radius of dozens of meters from the street entrance were pierced through the heart and burst into blood. All the noise was defeated in an instant. While the 4 people were just looking at each other with a miserable smile, the sword roared again. Not to mention Wu Yuan, who was already half crippled, the remaining 3 people could not hold on for long and were stabbed down one by one. Facing the combination of a person in the state of heaven and man and 2 people in the state of complete harmony, Tang Xingqing showed overwhelming combat power. Is the gap between Xianjiao and me so big? When Cage pressed the penetrating wound on his leg, lowered his eyes and gritted his teeth. The long sword fell to the ground. He was already desperate. Chapter 328 Breaking the Move. The situation was settled. Wu Yuan and the others were no longer able to resist, both physically and mentally. The strong men held iron chains and wanted to go up to the stage to lock him, but were stopped by Tang Xingqing. At the corner of the high platform, the executioner, who had been lying on the ground for a long time, saw this and became anxious. He first straightened the red scarf on his head, and then tried to raise the ghost-headed sword. However, after 2 consecutive attempts, the sword not only did not rise, but he also staggered. He looked at Tang Xingqing tremblingly. Although you hid as far as possible just now, you were still hit by the paralysis smoke, the latter said in a gentle voice. The word hide made the executioner sweat coldly. However, Tang Xingqing did not embarrass him. She gave him a look and signaled the chief and deputy executioners to come down. Then, surrounded by 4 hiltless daggers, she went up to the stage alone. Everyone understood that the Tang family's genius was going to execute the executioner himself. Is anyone else coming? Tang Xingqing stood on the stage and asked the first question. None of the 4 answered. Tang Xingqing looked at their faces one by one. Jeyun and Qinju were in their early 20s. At this moment, life and death were in the hands of others. The former was at a loss, while the latter was terrified. Wen Cage, a swordsman with a great reputation, let his sword fall beside his legs, looking dejected. Only Wu Yuan glared at him. Wu Yuan, you are still not convinced. Tang Xingqing was amused by this man's stubbornness. Do you remember what you said to me last time? She asked, twirling her hair and pacing back and forth. You mentioned Duan Xianan, Gu Yixin, and Hong Fan. You said that it would be as easy for them to defeat me as it would be for me to defeat you. She paused slightly. Black silk boots protruded from under her skirt, and the boots were outlined with a gold thread. She stopped and looked back, her long hair flying. Tang Xingqing's sword-like eyebrows and intimidating spirit made Wu Yuan forget her beautiful face and her identity as a woman in an instant. He only felt that he was facing a sheathed sword. Now, the 4 of you are in my hands, and your lives are hanging by a thread. Xianjiao raised his head and asked loudly. Is Duan Xianan here? The voice swept across the whole place. There was no echo. Is Gu Yixin here? The voice spread out across the long street. There was no echo. Is Hong Fan here? The voice went straight to the sky. There was no echo. The street entrance was extremely quiet, and the spectators didn't even dare to breathe. They didn't come to save you. Tang Xingqing put her hands behind her back and looked down. So I know that the 3 counties have nothing to do with the 9 states, and people's hearts cannot be guided. Wu Yuan's eyes finally turned red. Warriors do things with a sword in their hands. Tang Xingqing sighed and made a sword finger with her right hand. The short sword was horizontal, ready to go. At this time, she heard a sudden sound at her feet. Tang Xingqing dodged sideways and felt a shapeless fluid passing over her cheek, leaving a blood mark. The hidden arrow wounded someone, who, the sound of the wind moved and turned to the rooftop closest to the street entrance. A young man sat there at some point, with sand floating in the air on his fingertips. No introduction needed. Tang Xingqing saw this iconic ability and the face that was more beautiful than her own, and immediately knew who it was. Shisha Hongfen. She almost squeezed out these words from her teeth. Did you collude? The crowd below the stage also made a big noise. Before Tang Xingqing was on the list, Feng Xianqing was the only genius on the list from the 3 counties of Huaiyang State. Duanli City is not Zijing. The people here may not see a genius once in their lifetime. Miss Tang, Hong Fan greeted with a smile. If I say that I came to Duanli City to see the famous Wei Mang, and I happened to meet him, I wonder if you believe it. Do you think I believe it? Tang Xingqing asked back with an angry look. If you don't believe it, then don't believe it, Hong Fan replied casually, and looked at Wu Yuan. The latter was also looking at him. Brother Wu, Double Blade Thunder, it's our first meeting. He stood up from the roof, straightened his robe, and bowed solemnly. Where did the red sand come from? Wu Yuan asked in a hoarse and trembling voice. Good question. Hong Fan raised his voice and rolled up his sleeves. Zulong knows you are not convinced, so he specially sent Xingjin to respond. Wu Yuan burst into tears. The elite soldiers and generals under the high platform, as well as the 1,000-faced wind warrior, were all shocked and dared not move. Hong Fan's voice and momentum, not to mention others, even Tang Xingqing was frightened. But she immediately realized that the other party was deliberately making a mystery. Over the past 100 years, Xingjin has killed many innocent people, and Zulong has never punished them. Where is the special dispatch? You are talking nonsense, Tang Xingqing scolded sternly. You have committed the crime of usurpation. The sword finger turned, and a white rainbow shot out and pierced into the suspended sand's shield. After a blink of an eye, there were 3 more muffled sounds. Everyone looked again and saw 4 short swords running across from the east, south, west and north, all locked by fine sand. Ordinary Hunrin realm could no longer use weapons at this time. But Tang Xingqing only recited it together, and all the sharp swords were pulled out. These 4 swords are all Zhuan level and extremely sharp. Hong Fan understood it in his heart and jumped off the roof before the sword formation was closed. Stepping on the ground, the true essence of the sand world was infused, and a huge amount of loess was pulled up as a whole, and cast into armor. The pursuit was here in an instant. A silver light flashed from the side. Hong Fan punched to meet it, but saw that the short sword lost its stability and floated, and it slipped past a fist by a millimeter. This sword actually went in a spiral line. Along the arm of the sand giant, the blade cut around and forced a small half of the sand armor to harden completely. Due to the limitations of the human body structure, no matter how good the swordsman is, he can't do this. At the same time, the other 3 swords stabbed each other, piercing the armpit, crotch, and instep respectively. If there was no desert sand armor, Hong Fan knew that he would have to explain this. He kicked the sand and reorganized the sand armor. However, the sword formation was not chaotic at all, and it swirled and shuttled like starlight. Sure enough, as long as you are within the range of the cave, your mind will have no blind spots. Hong Fan stepped forward. But after several attempts, he couldn't take a complete step. Tang Xingqing's sword speed was really fast. Every blink of an eye, Hong Fan suffered multiple blows. In the upper body, the 2 swords specifically stabbed at the weak points, affecting the active defense and consuming mental energy. That's not all. In the lower body, the 3rd and 4th short swords were more exquisite. They did not seek to kill, but only attacked the joints every time Hong Fan stepped on the ground. Hips, knees, ankles. The sand armor uses the hardening of non-Newtonian fluids as a defense. But once the joints are hardened, it will also destroy Hong Fan's movement. Since its creation, the desert sand armor has been almost invincible. Until April this year, Su Pifang broke the move with force. And today, Tang Xingqing broke it with cleverness. In a few breaths, Hong Fan was pinned down. At this moment, even as an enemy, he still admired it. From Jinhei to Zijing, from Zijing to Huaiyang State, Hong Fan had never seen a warrior who could truly multitask, nor did he believe that there was a technique that could do that. Thoughts are like threads, how easy is that? But at this moment, he only felt that the 4 swords around him were completely controlled by 4 people and 4 minds, and they could respond and change at the same time. Great, 1,000 thoughts, Hong Fan shouted loudly. Hearing this, Tang Xingqing smiled. She twisted her hair lightly and took a step out from the high platform. The sword box flew down and supported the tip of her boot. Tang Xingqing closed her eyes. The 2 geniuses were now 30 meters apart. She was sure that this was a distance that the sand world was powerless to control. Chapter 329, Broken Dream. Tang Xingqing's estimate was good. Hong Fan's tactics were flexible, and he was an almost omnipotent warrior at medium and short distances. However, due to the control of the sand world, once the distance was pulled to 10 feet, both the sand thorns and the burning sand would naturally loosen and lose their lethality. Kite, consume. This was Tang Xingqing's only winning strategy. The sharp sword sounded without stopping. In the eyes of ordinary people, the situation was an unchanging attack and defense. Only high-level warriors could see the details of the game. The air on the back of the sand armor was distorted by the high heat. The front of the sand armor was more conducive to the repair of breaking the wind. Wu Yuan caught the abnormality of the innate fire spirit. Hong Fan had already completed the accumulation of power, and every step he took at this time could be a thunderous instant step. But Tang Xingqing was also clear about this. At any time, there must be a flying sword guarding the line between her and Hong Fan. In this way, the instant step was delayed. After another 10 rounds of attack and defense, Hong Fan slowly released high-temperature air from the gap between the sand. The wind and smoke were lingering. Tang Xingqing's eyes curved up. So far, Hong Fan has not been injured. But it's only a matter of time. The war of attrition seems fair. Duanli City is the Tang family's home court after all. A draw for me is a complete victory. He also understands this. Tang Xingqing calmed her heart. The sword box landed gently without stirring up a speck of dust. With victory in sight, she was unwilling to waste even a trace of true energy. On the other side, Hong Fan dispersed the flame flow. The Tang family's Kaiansi Nian is really amazing, he sighed in a deep voice. Tang Xingqing seemed to hear a rusty smell in this voice. The golden sea and red sand are well deserved, the sand flow is infinitely changeable, and it also has the power of fire. If I get within 3 feet, I'm afraid I will be defeated in an instant, she said calmly, unable to suppress the curved corners of her mouth. But once the heart is in chaos, the warrior is close to defeat. The only mistake you made today was to attack when you shouldn't have. His voice was decisive, cutting gold and separating jade. Wu Yuan clenched his fist. Hong Fan seemed to have been hit on the point and stopped talking. The sand armor thickened. Withstanding the harassment, he pressed forward half a step at a time. Tang Xingqing could already sense the opponent's impatience. Hong Fan is at a loss as to what to do. She controlled the 4 swords to attack like a bee and butterfly, while suspending the sword box to keep a distance. The slashing blows were heavier than the last. At this time, one of the 2 geniuses in the field was distracted. It's a pity it's not me. An ice-cold thought flowed through Hong Fan's mind. Another sword stabbed down, hitting the chest armor of the sand giant, an inch deeper than before. The last gasp. Tang Xingqing made a wrong judgment. Her reaction was half a beat slower. When the quicksand changed from real to virtual, Tang Xingqing realized that it was difficult for the flying sword to retreat, and Hong Fan almost grasped the sword with both hands. The other 3 flying swords attacked like crazy. It was useless. Hong Fan locked the sword with his left hand and formed a seal with his right hand. Sandblade, Wu Yuan couldn't help but exclaimed in joy. That's right, Hong Fan responded loudly. The golden stream shot out, and the flying sword wailed. After a breath, the 3rd-grade weapon was cut with vertical and horizontal cracks. The sand giant clenched his palms, and with a cracking sound, he crushed it alive. Tang Xingqing's body swayed slightly, and blood flowed from the tip of her nose. The battle was temporarily calmed down. I have seen many methods of using true energy to drive external objects through the air. Hong Fan stood up straight, scattered a few pieces of debris on the ground, and stepped into the soil. The dragon-capturing hand of Gongsun Shi, the general director of the Liangzhou Martial Arts Academy, the Ming 1000 arms of the Zijing Liu family, the Hunan power of the Zijing Liu family, He removed his mask and looked directly at Tang Xingqing. Just now, I intentionally limited the power of the desert sand armor, and I revealed several flaws. You must have noticed it, if your method is similar to theirs, and you can directly control external objects such as earth and stone, you should not let it go, but you didn't. When Tang Xingqing heard this, his face was as gloomy as iron. I don't know how Qianxi Nian controls objects, and how it differs from other methods, Hong Fan smiled calmly. But I guess you can only control these swords at this time, Miss Tang, is that right? Tang Xingqing was silent. She couldn't say that Master Hong's guess was too damn right. There are three core concepts of Qianxi Nian. One is distraction, the second is insight, and the third is branding. Whether it is a sword or a knife, it can only be driven after being branded. For beginners of Qianxi Nian, it often takes several months to brand a weapon. And with Tang Xingqing's current cultivation level, when she is in good condition, it will take several hours. On the execution platform, the judge of Duanli City couldn't help but send another follower to Tang Mansion in a hurry. Wu Yuan and the other four were already in high spirits. 4 swords are just a stalemate, not to mention one less. The situation is reversed. Hong Fan took a step forward. Tang Xingqing stepped back accordingly. But she was unwilling to accept failure, but became calmer and more confident. Not for anything else. It's just because I've fought hundreds of battles and never lost. She jumped off the sword box and stepped on the ground. This is my 5th sword. The voice was cold and emotionless. The wooden box cracked in the middle, as if it had been cut. Hong Fan looked closely and saw not a sword, but a broken narrow spearhead. The second great earthly divine weapon Pure Thoughts equipped by the 11th generation ancestor of the Tang family was broken by Qianli Yibu 67 years ago, Tang Xingqing explained loudly. She probably felt that it was unfair to win by borrowing the advantage of weapons. The 3 flying swords surrounding Hong Fan pierced vertically into the ground. Tang Xingqing closed her eyes again, formed seals with her hands, and blood flowed from her throat, soaking her front. 3 of the 4 seals in her heart were broken in an instant. The 3 flying swords lost their spirituality. Hong Fan could see that Tang Xingqing herself was also seriously injured. Why do you have to do this? He was interrupted as he was about to speak. Shisha, this is my trump card, let's see who wins. With a clear buzzing sound, Pure Thoughts burst out close to the ground. The street entrance seemed to be hit by a cannon. Dust rose up and was torn apart by the storm. Wu Yuan saw that only half of the round shield in front of the sand giant was left, and there was a gap in the waist and ribs that was recovering at high speed. Pure Thoughts shot back, and Hong Fan stepped aside. After 2 moves, he had a concrete sense of the power of this magic weapon fragment. The speed was 40% faster than the flying sword, and the destructive power was nearly 3 times. 4 swords for 1 gun, the overall combat power actually decreased. But other than this, Tang Xingqing had no other way. At this point, Hong Fan completely understood the strength of his opponent and planned to clean up the situation. He enjoyed fighting with Xianjiao, but time was not on his side after all. In addition to Wei and Xiaoyu who went out, the Tang family also had an innate master. Miss Tang, let's stop here, Hong Fan advised in a gentle voice. What did you say? Tang Xingqing couldn't believe her ears. But she really heard the contempt in the other party's words. Maybe it was not intentional. But it was precisely because of this that she let out her inner voice. Her heart, which had been forced to remain calm, suddenly caught fire again. Pure Thoughts launched a 3rd attack. It was exactly what Hong Fan wanted. Tang Xingqing was very strong. Her peak output was definitely higher than Hong Fan's. Tang Xingqing was also very weak. Because she had no other tricks except the sword, and her all-out attack without defense was too biased. In the battle between the two, Hong Fan could make mistakes, test, and adjust countless times with his iron wall defense and the double mana bar brought by his dual cultivation of the Life Star martial arts. But Tang Xingqing couldn't stand it the second time. 30 meters away, Pure Thoughts passed by in an instant. It penetrated the arm shield, blasted the outer armor, caught up with the body, and left a shallow wound half an inch deep on the shoulder. At the same time, Hong Fan turned sideways, straightened his arms, and rooted on the ground. His right arm was naturally straightened, and his shoulders were locked, forming a nearly 2-meter-long straight track. Just this one track broke through the cold and hot boundaries of the weapon. Hong Fan clenched his right fist. Tang Xingqing's heart was filled with warning signs, and she wanted to call back Pure Thoughts. But it was too late. The fire exploded like thunder. A black shadow pierced 10 feet, leaving a red mark in the air. Tang Xingqing's abdomen burst into blood, and she fell to her knees exhausted. At this moment, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. When did he finish storing energy? How can the sand bullet last that far? Reaching into her abdomen, Tang Xingqing pulled out the foreign object from her intestines. It turned out to be the tip of her own broken flying sword. She immediately realized her mistake. The opponent's slow release of air when he gave up the instant step, the opponent's fist stomped on the ground when he crushed the flying sword, and those words and emotional guidance, it turns out that I have been played in the palm of my hand. The shame surged, making Tang Xingqing almost want to die. Thunder sounded for the second time. Hong Fan crossed the long street. His sand armor scattered, and the white clothes on his left shoulder were stained red with blood. It was the only injury on his body. This was the injury he took for the sake of a quick victory. Tang Xingqing knelt down and looked at Hong Fan, and suddenly had the illusion that a dream was broken. She had won every battle. She had trampled countless people. She was sure that she was the protagonist of her life. All the martial arts geniuses were like this. If they were not like this, they would not be on the top 3. Until they met each other. To sift through the sand to find the gold, this is what it means. Hong Fan, Tang Xingqing stared at her opponent, as if she wanted to copy his appearance. Your killing move just now could not be arranged in advance, so it is not enough to rely on. You still have a trump card, right? She asked in a breath, regardless of her injuries. You guessed right, Hong Fan nodded in agreement. I have instant steps, even if I can't get close, I can always move away. Sandwings soared into the air, and then swooped down like a hawk after accumulating strength. The speed is 3 times my normal limit. With your weak and slow body, you can't avoid it, nor can you block it. Then why don't you do this? Tang Xingqing asked. Because you have to temporarily leave the battlefield, Hong Fan replied. I don't want to put Brother Wu and the others in danger, so I gave up using tricks. No one spoke at the street entrance for a long time. Ha! Tang Xingqing lowered her head and laughed. It turns out that there are really people in the world who have stronger empathy with heaven and man than me. She dispersed her true energy and stopped resisting. Suddenly, she felt an unprecedented strong feeling in her heart. Jiazhou is vast. Huiyang State is too small. P.S. One update today, about 2,800 words. In fact, I want to update twice a day, but my brain power often can't keep up. Chapter 330, The Same Path. The winner has been decided. Wu Yuan stood up with his 2 swords, stepped down from the execution platform with 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow, and guarded Hong Fan with his 3 companions. There is a system of collective responsibility in Kai and Mianfeng's system. If the chief officer is in trouble during the operation, the subordinates will definitely not have a good ending. So even if the Guantuang Lishi were terrified, they still surrounded him. Then, they just looked at Hong Fan and dared not move again. Through the battle just now, the huge difference in combat power between Xian Jiao and fellow warriors has been clearly seen. If you don't go up, you may die. If you go up, you will definitely die. Everyone knows what to choose. Young Master Hong, the oldest one, Cage forced his injured arm to bow and came over. It's time to break out. We have horses in the alley west of the street market entrance. Why don't we go there? Wu Yuan also added in a low voice. The houses in Duanli City are heavily guarded. Once we charge, hundreds of people won't be able to surround us. He glanced at the frightened archers outside the street entrance. But if the Tang family sends more people, it's hard to say. Yes, Hong Fan opened his mouth to reply, and just uttered one word when he noticed a star in his peripheral vision. There was no sound, no murderous intent. But his body had already moved instinctively, snatched Wu Yuan's sword and slashed at Tang Xingqing. The silver light was intercepted by the star shuttle that changed direction temporarily. The good sword that could collide with his 1-level flying sword several times was actually broken by a single blow. How dare you? The roar came first and then came. After that, a figure was chasing. Hong Fan ignored it, just stretched out his arms, lifted Tang Xingqing into his arms, and grabbed the throat. The figure flying at high speed was forced to stop and landed on the execution platform. This was a man in his 50s, with long hair and a sharp gaze. A double-headed iron spike flew through the air and hovered beside him. It was only half a sentence, but it was only a moment. Only when he confirmed that the hostage in front of him had stopped the newcomer did the fear in Hong Fan's heart subside. Only his heartbeat was like a drum, still beating in his ears. Flying Star, Tang Shengwang, he whispered a name. This person is the martial arts master of the Tang family, second only to Tang Xiaoyu. According to the information provided by the Martial Arts Academy before going south, he should have the innate 3-in-1 cultivation. Let her go, Tang Shengwang threatened with his beard and hair all standing up. Do you think I'm stupid? Hong Fan replied immediately. Shisha, as long as you return Kinger, I will ensure that you leave this place alive, Tang Shengwang said sincerely. Hundreds of eyes in the audience looked at Hong Fan. But he just shook his head. How can life and death be handed over to others? Hong Fan said, rolling up the rolling yellow sand. Under his feet, a wide flying wing quickly unfolded until the current control limit of the sand world. Relax, don't resist. Soon, Wu Yuan and the other four were swept by the sand's flow and merged into the structure. Hong Fan, Tang Shengwang angrily pointed his sword and the star shuttle was ready to go. However, the sand spike only pressed halfway into Tang Zinking's neck, forcing him to retract his action. The sand wing began to move slowly on the long street. In order to propel it, the consumption of the flame flow can only be described as squandering. At first, it was propelled by compressed air jets similar to the instant step. The innate fire spirit energy stored in the Danshan was consumed in a few seconds, in exchange for the initial speed of the flight. Then, in the tortuous air intake, multi-stage heating and supercharging continued to provide power. In a blink of an eye, Duanli City was left behind. How can this be? It's a magical skill, Wu Yuan trembled. They survived from a disparate situation, and they were naturally at a loss after the ups and downs. Tang Ziking, who was leaning on Hong Fan's arms, actually forgot the pain and just stared at the rain cloud that hid him head-on. The flying wing was 300 meters above the ground and past the wall of Duanli City. This height is enough to make most of the innate masters helpless. Hong Fan was about to breathe a sigh of relief when he heard the wind blowing behind him. Shisha, you little brat, how dare you kidnap my Tang family's daughter? A shout broke through the air, pushing across like a surging tide. Hong Fan glanced back and saw a man wearing a tall crown and scale armor rising from the city to chase him. The distance was shortened by more than 100 meters in an instant. The iron scales fell off from this man, turning into at least 400 or 500 meteors with trails, surrounding and chasing him. They were as magnificent as clouds. They were as subtle as raindrops. Who is coming can be known at a glance. Didn't Tang Xiaoyu go out? Hong Fan cursed inwardly and accelerated with all his strength. But reason told him that he couldn't escape. At this moment, the situation changed again. From the lower side of Tang Xiaoyu, a force shot out from the air, growing in the wind, and in a moment expanded into a golden giant palm 7 meters square with 5 distinct fingers. This palm hit the target as soon as it came. The air exploded, humming non-stop. It was like thousands of bells ringing at the same time. The flying wing gradually moved away in the turbulence. Hundreds of meters away, Hong Fan heard the angry roar and the familiar hearty laughter from afar. With 5 people on board, the maximum speed of the powered sand wing was greatly affected, only more than 150 kilometers. Even so, Hong Fan only lasted for a few dozen seconds before he used up his Yanliu Qi. Fortunately, the sand wing was still able to glide with the wind, and it didn't land until 16 miles north of Duanli City. It should be safe. Hong Fan pressed his painful eyebrows and glanced around. He was soaked in sweat, and this time he was really exhausted, and even had to rely on Qin Zhezhang to support him. On the contrary, Tang Zinking's Qi was not exhausted, and she could barely walk independently. With the physical fitness of a peak warrior in the power realm, injuries to non-vital parts are still far from fatal. But Jingnian is far away in Duanli City, so there is no need to worry about her threats. Where are we going? Jie Yun looked back to the south and asked. Go north first and walk a little further, Wu Yuan replied immediately. Thinking of the hundreds of iron rain chasing him, he was still frightened. The 6 walked forward for a few miles, but instead of waiting for the pursuers, they saw a beggar on the roadside. He sat huddled under a tree, wearing a half-torn black cloak. It was a bit abrupt. When Cage held the hilt of the sword, Hong Fan gently pushed Qin Zhezhang away and walked slowly towards him. But is it Senior Duan, the founder of the Iron Palm? He asked with a bow. Laughter suddenly rang out. Haha, with my disguise, you also guessed it. The voice was so heavy that it seemed to shatter rotten wood. If it weren't for the palm before, you might not have guessed it. The beggar stood up and pulled open his cloak. Then, his figure swelled like an inflatable. A tall and strong man shook out in front of the few people. He was half a head taller than Hong Fan, with short beards on his cheeks and under his chin. He was wearing a linen shirt covered with yellow soil, and a bright red silk wrapped around his waist. "I am Jingsha." The big man patted his chest and said proudly. "It's the Iron Palm opener in person." Wu Yuan clasped his fists excitedly. "Today I have seen Senior Duan and young Master Hong in succession. Could it be that the ancient spear master is here too?" he asked, glancing at Tang Xingqing. The latter was a little uncomfortable. If Gu Kid didn't come, how could he have my ability to hide in disguise? Jingsha proudly put his hands on his waist and smiled at Tang Xingqing again. "Mother of the Tang family, you have good skills, but your luck is not so good." Tang Xingqing was speechless. Hong Fan heard this and bowed to thank him. "Thank you for your help when I left the city just now." Jingsha waved his hand fiercely. "What are you thanking me for? Didn't you pay me for my help a few hours ago?" He flicked his thumb and sent a silver coin flying into the air with a clang. Wu Yuan and the others were confused. Hong Fan smiled knowingly. "In fact, today it's not just me helping you, you're also helping me," Jingsha continued. "Of course, the old traitor Tang Xiaoyao deliberately spread the news that he was not there to target you, but to ambush me." The name old traitor made Tang Xingqing frown. But she was not a fool, and she knew she had to endure it now. "He and I were originally evenly matched. Brother Hong, you defeated the Tang family's young lady first, and then forced Tang Shengwang to take action, forcing the old traitor Tang to take action. In this way, I got the upper hand for nothing and got the advantage of a slap in the face." At this point, Jingsha laughed heartily. After laughing, he glanced at a few people. "So, where are you going next?" Jingsha asked, his eyes finally falling on Hong Fan's face. "Brother Hong, come with me to the Beisheng army." He made the invitation without any hesitation. The Beisheng army was the leader of the Huaiyang Kingdom's righteous army, and it was one of the destinations that Hong Fan had been determined to go to. But Jingsha, as a senior member of the organization, personally invited him at this time, which meant more than just going there to be a guest. Hong Fan was weighing the pros and cons when Jingsha patted him on the shoulder. "Don't be fussy and worry about nothing. I have seen everything that happened in Weikang. You are a kind person and you will definitely get along with me. Since you have come to Huaiyang Kingdom, you must be willing to do something. As long as you are willing to do something, sooner or later you will be on the same level as me. Why not save the trouble?" One sentence after another. Rough, simple, and conceited. But Hong Fan listened to his words and looked at his person, and not only did he not feel bad, but he also felt a kind of pleasure like a hot knife cutting oil. "Okay, I will go with you, Senior," he replied decisively. "I knew you were a fellow traveler." Jingsha was overjoyed, shook Hong Fan's shoulders violently, and patted Wu Yuan and the other four in turn. "Just don't call me Senior from now on. Words like elder brother or big brother are more pleasing to the ear." The 6 people walked in a row, walking as if they were driving a car. Only Tang Xingqing, who was a prisoner, was sealed by Jingsha's danshan, and was held in the palm of his hand like a rabbit. The Beisheng army is in the northeast of Duanli City. In the afternoon, the sun is just right. A bird's cry spread across the sky, depicting the vastness of the wilderness. Hong Fan looked in the direction of the sound and saw a long formation of human characters in the distance. That was the first team of southern geese this year. P.S. I don't know if it's because I'm old. The author is 32 years old in lunar age. I feel that I don't have enough energy. A few years ago, I could recover every other day after fitness, but now I can't recover even after doing it every 3 days. The same is true for writing and thinking. When my brain is exhausted, I can't make sense of an ordinary sentence after writing and deleting it for a long time, but I can finish it easily after sleeping. I wonder if I should eat something to nourish my brain. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 331, Gunmaster. It was a July afternoon. The sun was blazing. Starting from the hilly area outside Duanli City, the group headed north. The official road was wide, but the scenery along the way was miserable. Not to mention seeing pedestrians on the road, even the few forests they passed by were only left with stumps and shrubs left after being cut down. This was thanks to the 2 sieges of Duanli. After more than an hour, after walking more than 50 miles, Hong Fan began to see the Beisheng army rangers wearing leather armor. 6 of the 7 people were injured, and Wu Yuan and others were equipped with swords, which could be said to be the most eye-catching among the passers-by. But since Duan Xiaonan was there, these were not a problem. Every time the rangers came in a fierce group, they immediately stopped shouting and dismounted to salute when they saw the face of the leader. Seeing this, Hong Fan asked Duan Xiaonan to borrow a horse to free Tang Xingqing from the embarrassing situation. The latter thanked him like a mosquito. After another 10 miles, they climbed the last high hill and saw 2 green mountains converging towards the center at the end of their vision. The pass between the 2 mountains is called Tingshan Pass, which is a strategic point in the country. We took this pass a year ago, and since then we can dominate the south. Duan Xiaonan pointed to the north and introduced. The mountain on the left of the pass is called Zulin Mountain. What do you think the one on the right is called? It must be Yaolin Mountain. Wu Yuan, who was also a newcomer, was the first to answer. Tang Xingqing curled her lips. What do you think, Brother Hong? Duan Xiaonan asked again with a straight face. The pass is called Tingshan Pass. Since the one on the left is not Tingshan, it must be the one on the right, Hong Fan answered. Duan Xiaonan laughed. Wu Yuan was ashamed for a moment. As they kept walking north, the mountains gradually rose. Both mountains were green. Only at the eastern foot of Tingshan Mountain, Hong Fan could see a yellowish vertical belt in the distance, which was more than a li wide, like a whip mark left by a god. That's the remains of the storm a year and a half ago, Duan Xiaonan explained. Tingshan Pass was originally strong, but we were able to capture it because of this disaster. When he said this, he rarely smiled. At 4 p.m., everyone arrived at the pass. The north and south gates are more than 100 meters wide and 50 feet high, spanning the east and west mountain ridges, and are slightly more than a mile deep. Passage is still by face recognition. After passing this pass, the area of more than 100 miles is under the jurisdiction of our Beisheng army. Duan Xiaonan was the first to walk out of the city gate of the north gate, waving his arm to lead the way. Hong Fan followed his gaze. Under the vast sky, between the 2 mountains, he saw a second piece of blue sky. That's Yishan Lake. The speaker was Tang Xingqing. Yishan Lake? What a good name, Hong Fan sighed. He saw a flock of birds flying low in the clouds and water, riding ripples. Yishan Lake is close to the left mountain, leaving a flat field on the right. By the lake, a prosperous settlement was all plain, gleaming in the sunlight, as if cast in silver. To the north of the settlement, there were endless rice fields. Longqiu Town, where our army is currently stationed, Duan Xiaonan pointed. Let's go there. As the only Yuanzi master of the Beisheng army, Duan Xiaonan's return was no small matter. What's more, Chisha and Qiandiangsing were also accompanying him. The reception desk was the main hall of the mansion of the former number 1 tyrant in Longqiu Town. Within half an hour, the top leaders of the Beisheng army, including the chief and deputy leaders, arrived one after another. The first to arrive was Cheng Yimin, the chief of internal affairs of the Beisheng army, who worked in the next-door office. He wore a high crown, had a long beard, and had 2 bags under his eyes. According to Duan Xiaonan, he was originally the county magistrate appointed by the Huaiyang royal court. Following closely behind was an old man who looked over 60 years old and strong. This is Chu Yuanke, the elder brother Chu, who has reached the peak of Xianshan cultivation and is the best player under Yuanzi. Duan Xiaonan introduced him. Chu Yuanke waved his hands repeatedly and exchanged greetings with Hong Fan and the others. He is the head of the Xianling Chunyang sect of Huaiyang state. He was victorious in every battle when he was in the early years of his career, and was known as Beisheng Guang. Duan Xiaonan continued to introduce. The Beisheng army got its name from him, and here he is this. He gave a thumbs up. The third person to arrive was a middle-aged warrior with a scar on the plain. General Su Yongtao, with his Xianshan Sai cultivation, was once a general of the Xianfeng army and the chief officer of our army. This time it was Chu Yuanke's turn to introduce. Including Duan Xiaonan, there were already 4 high-ranking officials of the Beisheng army. The 5th person arrived half a quarter of an hour later. This was a tall and strong young man in his early 20s. He leaned the hoe he was holding against the door, patted his body, and rubbed the soles of his shoes before coming in. He was wearing a short ochre jacket, with new mud on his straw sandals, and a square face with plain features. It was obvious that he was a good farmer. Just as Tang Xingqing was wondering, the 4 people from the Beisheng army stood up and left their seats. Why did you come so late, Brother Gu? Duan Xiaonan went up to him and said in a feigned anger. I thought I had nothing to do today, so I went to the fields. The man in the short jacket showed a very restrained smile and replied in Mandarin with a strong Shangzhou accent. Hong Fan and the others already knew who he was. But as Gu Yixin, the leader of the ancient spear in person, Wu Yuan couldn't help but ask first. "It's me." Gu Yixin nodded and bowed to the strangers one by one. When he saw Hong Fan, he was slightly stunned, probably because he was shocked by the former's outstanding appearance. "Shisha Hong Fan," Gu Yixin asked tentatively. "That's right," Hong Fan replied seriously. As a time traveler, he inevitably looked down on the people of this world, so much so that he once made arrogant remarks to Hong Xing that he looked down on the Xianjiao. However, standing in front of the real gun champion at this moment, Hong Fan actually felt a little restrained. After all, this person was the real leader of the Xianjiao list, and he defeated the previous leader to reach the top. Gu Yixin, this person, marked the upper limit of the talent of a generation of young warriors. Wu Yuan and others were already excited. Only Tang Xingqing looked lost. She looked at the former Xianjiao leader who was too ordinary in front of her, and glanced at the door. It was not a gun, but a hoe. There was still rust on the old iron. Tang Xingqing was full of disillusionment. Gu Yixin noticed her expression and skillfully guessed the reason. "I'm sorry," he scratched the back of his neck and apologized. Tang Xingqing's face first flushed, and then turned pale. Seeing this, Jiu Yuanka hurriedly asked someone to take her down to treat her injuries. P.S. It was so difficult to write today. I struggled to finish this chapter, so it's a little late. Chapter 332 Rules. After the 10 people introduced each other and exchanged greetings, the red sun had already leaned against the shoulder of Zulin Mountain. The dinner was held on the 3rd floor of the garden in the mansion, from which you can see Yishan Lake and the sunset rippling in the lake. I went to the 3 official warehouses in Duanli City, and the grain was full. Duan Xiaonan first mentioned what he saw and heard during this investigation. The city wall was renovated, raised and widened, and many new weapons were installed. Judging by the inscriptions, they were all sent from Yunlin City. The morale of the soldiers in the city is not bad. I disguised myself as a beggar and got a few copper coins from a group of patrol teams. He drank a bowl of yellow wine by himself, like drinking water. The grain of a county supplies a city, and the Tang family provides 100% of the salary, so the morale can't be bad, Su Yanteo responded, raising his chin slightly. Feng Boyuan does have this ability. Hong Fan had heard of this man he mentioned. He was from the direct line of the Feng family and was the garrison commander of Duanli City, stationed in the military camp outside the city. What I didn't expect this time was that the traitor Tang didn't leave, but hid in the city to wait for me, Duan Xiaonan continued. Fortunately, Brother Hong captured Kaiandi Angsing at that time, so he was forced to fight back. He took a blow from my palm, and he must have vomited some blood. There was a hint of laughter in his voice, but there was no smile on his face. After 2 failed sieges, he is now very wary of us. Jiu and Su were both silent after hearing this. Duanli City is indeed easy to defend but difficult to attack. Hong Fan also nodded. I calculated it when I entered the city, and the density of the horse-faced wall is even higher than that of my hometown Jinhei City, Su Yanteo sighed. In fact, if we had to attack by force before, we could have taken it down. There are more than 10,000 elite soldiers under our command. With them as the backbone, it is easy to pull out an army of 50,000. If the gap in the level of warriors is not so big, we can also fight against the Xianfeng army. He clenched his fist. The defenders of Duanli City can only gather less than 20,000 soldiers. It's just that the Tang family's Kaianxin is really sharp, leaning on the parapet and looking down. Flying swords shuttle back and forth. Killing people is just like mowing grass. Wu Yuan, who was sitting next to Su Yanteo, couldn't help but recall his powerlessness when facing Tang Xingqing twice, so his face was sad. That's true, when Cage frowned at his brother when he saw this. If we had known that Kaiandi Angsing was so powerful, the 3 of us would never come to save you. Everyone laughed. Today, Duan Tishang is here. Anyway, whether we come or not, Wu Jie is just a false alarm. Kinju was just trying to make fun of it. No, I didn't intend to take action. He picked up the wine cup, but heard Duan Xiaonan say. The atmosphere at the table changed slightly. Kinju was thinking that Duan Xiaonan looked down on him and the others, and his hand holding the cup froze, and his smile became forced. When Cage and Wu Yuan himself were normal, Duan Xiaonan also felt something was wrong and hurried to explain. It's not that I don't want to save you, it's just that it's inconvenient. He paused for a moment and then made up a story. There are two situations in which warriors of our generation can do whatever they want. The first is when they are alone, without any worries, and don't even care about their own lives. For such people, the list of evil and the management of the martial arts academy are nothing. They can be killed or left at will, and every day they live is earned by their own ability. Hong Fan immediately thought of Wan Guangji and Zhu Gu. The second is a battle that is open to the public. It can be a fight between two people to the death, or a battle between two armies. Seeing that Hong Fan was listening carefully, Duan Xiaonan spoke in more detail. Having signed a life and death agreement and hearing the drums of war, they will of course resort to all means. For example, Brother Hong used a poisoned blade in the battle against Su Peifen, and others had nothing to say. Besides that, let alone Yuanzi and Xianrun, even those on the Xianbang have constraints. People with fists of similar size become a crowd, and they must compromise with each other. Once people compromise, there are rules. The first kind of rule is the law. In Jizhao it was the imperial court, and here it is the princes. He looked at Wu Yuan and the others. For example, you assassinated the county lieutenant of Yu County and were arrested and executed by Qian Mianfen. This is a public matter and follows the king's way. The second rule is morality. Without a reason recognized by the world, the big cannot bully the small, and things cannot be done to the extreme. This is the principle of the lower people. In the situation at noon today, if I acted deliberately, I could kill Tang Shengwang with one blow, and Tang Xiaoyao would have no way to deal with me. But if he turns around, he can also come and bloodbath Tingshan Pass in Longqiu town. The final outcome will be unbearable for both me and him. So even if I am by your side today, it is not good to take action against the young lady of the Tang family. Duan Xiaonan spread his hands. Chu Yuanqi and Su Yantao nodded to prove it. Hong Fan understood something. Earlier in Jinhei, the highest force was the two innates, and the power structure was very simple. Later in Zijing, with the protection of this Hangwu Academy, not only him, but every Tiki opened his mouth and said breaking a crime and resisting the law, and never needed to consider the unwritten rules. I have always been a warrior, but I have never been in the martial arts world. Hong Fan thought about it and felt something was wrong. But Tang Xiaoyao attacked me today, he asked. Yes, but since you didn't kill the Tang family's daughter, Tang Laoge has no excuse to kill you, not to mention that you are still on the list of Xianjiao, Duan Xiaonan said as a matter of course. If he stops you, he will either detain you for a while and send you out of the country with courtesy, or simply wait for your family to pay for the redemption. Why, you didn't know this before, he reacted again. After I left home, I served as a Tiki in Liangshao. I don't know much about these, Hong Fan said bluntly. Are you still a Tiki now? At this time, Jiu Yuanqi suddenly interrupted and asked. Su Yantao also looked solemn. Now I am acting according to my own will, Hong Fan answered indirectly. Tiki or not Tiki is not a big deal, unless some admiral comes. The cloud pattern silk clothes are useless here, Duan Xiaonan casually mentioned this. Let's go back to what happened just now. Whether it's legal or moral, the premise is that the top warriors of the parties can fight each other. If the innate fights against the heavenly man, both sides can't sit at the same table, and there are no rules to speak of. After listening to the whole thing, Qin Jisheng was still confused. But Hong Fan had understood it. To put it bluntly, this thing is similar to the ways of the world. There is no clear standard, and it all depends on grasping the degree. Immediately, he thought of other righteous armies. The 5 Yuanzi masters of Huaiyang state all came from local families, and only Duan Xiaonan stood on the side of the righteous army. What about the rest of the righteous army in Huaiyang state? Are they all protected by Brother Duan's deterrence? Hong Fan asked curiously. Duan Xiaonan smiled immediately. How can I protect so many, Brother Hong? You think so highly of Brother Duan. Although I am happy, I also feel quite pressured. He was silent for a moment. It's not that Feng Yuanzi can't take action, but taking action is just venting anger, which is meaningless. This time it was Chu Yuanqi who answered. The territory of Huaiyang state spans 2,000 miles from east to west and 1,000 miles from north to south. About 1/3 of its 3 counties and 20 cities have suffered disasters or rebellions, and the people's hearts and institutions have been scattered. If the royal court wants to rectify the situation, in addition to suppression, it must also send officials to restore the government offices, select strong men, and station troops for a long time. Otherwise, the basic functions of statistics, governance, and taxation cannot be restored. But these are long-term plans that require first paying and then reaping. With Teodes spending in style, killing the chicken to get the eggs is too slow. How could he do such a thing? Jiuyuinka said disdainfully. Chapter 333 Pretending. Hong Fan easily understood what Jiuyuinka said. It was similar to the overseas colonies of the British Empire during the national independence movement after World War II. It was similar to Afghanistan where the US troops were stationed. In terms of strength, the former could easily destroy and occupy the latter. But this kind of occupation was superficial, because it did not have the basic middle and lower level management capabilities, and instead became a bottomless pit of blood loss. In addition, Hong Fan could hear that Jiuyuinka's disdain was not only directed at the royal court. The second meaning he expressed was that most of the rebel forces, except for the Beishing army, were at best just products of chaos, and did not have the will and ability to make progress. You came here from Hanzhou, and you must cross the Yao River, Su Yantao asked Wu Yuan and others. How is the Duangang over there? It still occupies 2 county towns and can barely manage it, Wu Yuan replied. There is Tingshan on the west side, and the Leng family has a celestial being on the east side, so Sun Longtao can't do anything, Su Yantao nodded, and then looked at Hong Fan. Young Master Hong came from Pang County, and I heard that he had an intersection with the Dahua army. Not a good intersection, Hong Fan smiled bitterly. The third leader of Nikotao Mountain was Kai Mianfeng's hidden man. He led people to ambush and kill me, but I killed him instead. He only mentioned Hao Yuang, and didn't mention Gan Dexiao. Can the leader also be turned by Kai Mianfeng? Su Yantao sneered, and the scar on his face became more and more conspicuous. I originally hoped that the Dahua army could put some pressure on the Tang family from the west. Yantao, don't talk about the shortcomings of other families, Jiuyuinka reminded him. But there was also self-conceit in his words. If it were a few days ago, Hong Fan would probably think the same as Su Yantao. However, after seeing Tang Xiaoyao take action today, he understood Gan Dexiao's resentment at that time. Stability is the foundation of construction. No one will store water in a barrel with a hole in it. If there is a hanging sword that can reset everything at any time, how many people can calm down and do things? The significance of a Yuanzi warrior is more than just exchanging pieces, Hong Fan thought, and couldn't help but glance at Duan Xiaonan who was chewing meat. The latter immediately noticed his gaze. Brother Hong, do you dislike the way I eat? He was as frank as ever. Hong Fan shook his head. It's just that I suddenly thought of Tang Xiaoyao's iron scale sword formation in the afternoon. This is the first time that a Yuanzi master has attacked me. He took a deep breath. A loud shout is like the color of the sky and the earth, not to mention those flying swords, which are slightly vague, making me feel like I am naked facing a rainstorm, and I just feel that there is no escape. Hong Fan's words inspired the vivid memories of Wu Yuan and others. Jiuyuinka and Su Yantao obviously also had personal experience. The atmosphere at the table suddenly became cold. With a clang, Duan Xiaonan threw the cleaned pork bones into the plate. To be honest, Tang Lao's treacherous killing method is much better than mine. He suddenly pressed his hands full of lard on the table and looked straight at Hong Fan. So, are you scared or regretful? Hong Fan was about to answer, but was interrupted again. Brother Hong, if you have any regrets, I will advise you to go back to where you came from. Don't be embarrassed, it won't hurt our friendship. Don't blame me for taking advantage of my age. People in the world can choose any way they want, but don't go against your own ideas just because someone is watching you. Duan Xiaonan's voice was obviously not loud, but it blew the candles around him. Even the chirping of insects became lower. Hong Fan was startled and no longer rushed to answer. He closed his eyes for a moment until he could hear his heartbeat clearly, then opened his eyes and answered. I am a little scared, but I don't regret it. Duan Xiaonan was relieved. That's good. He bent his back, reached out to pick up the second pig's trotter, stuffed it into his mouth and chewed it. On the other side, Hong Fan also seemed to have taken off his shackles and drank a full cup. On the contrary, Jiuyuinka, Su Yantao, and even Zheng Yun, Qin Jisheng and others were a little uncomfortable. Fortunately, there was also Chang Yimin at the table. Although he was not good at martial arts, he had been in the officialdom for a long time. After several rounds of toasts, he heated up the place and restored the atmosphere. At this time, Hong Fan realized that there was a blind spot in today's banquet. Gu Yixin, who was sitting on the right side of Duan Xiaonan. Since he sat down, this former Xianjiao number 1 only ate the dishes honestly and never opened his mouth. Others had hot yellow wine in their cups, but he had cold water in front of him. "Brother Gu, don't you drink?" Hong Fan asked curiously. Gu Yixin heard someone calling his name, and his thick eyebrows raised slightly. He crushed the vegetable stalks in his mouth with a few clicks and swallowed them, facing Hong Fan straight, and then replied, "I drank once before practicing martial arts, and I got drunk quickly. I can drink after practicing martial arts." The reply was so detailed that it seemed like he was answering a question. "So you don't like rice wine?" Hong Fan asked again. "It's hard to say whether you like it or not." Gu Yixin actually thought for a while before answering. "But 1 pound of rice can only produce 2 pounds of wine. I feel uncomfortable thinking about wasting food." When this was said, Wu Yuan and others who were drinking happily blushed. "Shame on you, shame on you." When Cage hurriedly put down the wine pot, as if his hand was burned. "The ancient spear leader taught me." Hearing this, Gu Yixin was also shocked. "I'm talking about me, not you." He waved his hands repeatedly. The Buzzy Vajra Sutra says, "Existence and non-existence, increase and decrease are all created by the mind. I feel uncomfortable drinking, so I don't drink. This is my own creation. How can I use my mind to suppress others' minds?" Gu Yixin said it very seriously, and when he quoted scriptures, his words were paused, giving people a special sense of dullness. Therefore, Wu Yuan and others knew that he was sincere. So those who drank water at the table continued to drink water, and those who drank wine continued to drink wine. Then, Hong Fan couldn't help scratching his heart and asked the question he had wanted to ask for a long time. "Brother Gu, when you visited Xiangping Mountain that day, what did Chuloi say to you?" This question was beyond Gu Yixin's expectation and attracted the attention of everyone at the table. He thought about it for a long time. "I was paying my respects to the head of the Shura sect and the leaders, and suddenly there was a commotion outside. It was junior brother Chu who rushed in from outside the door. That's what it tasted like." Hong Fan nodded gently. "Senior sister Yuan Lingsu, who was responsible for welcoming me in, suddenly had a dark face," Gu Yixin added, as expected. Hong Fan nodded again. "Then what?" he asked anxiously. "Let me think about it. It seems that junior brother Chu said that I looked like a spatula when he saw me." Gu Yixin scratched the back of his neck and smiled embarrassedly. Hiss, everyone, including Du and Xianan, took a breath. "Wow, Chulei is really not a good son of man. No wonder you are angry." Hong Fan slapped the table and used interjections for the first time. "I'm not angry," said Gu Yixin. "I went back to look at the water tank, and he was right. Brother Gu, if you are angry, just be angry. People have to pretend when they are alive." Duan Xianan laughed and slapped his greasy hands on his short coat. "If you were not angry, why did you fight with him and stab him 3 times and 6 times? I'm really not angry," Gu Yixin argued seriously. "Master Li proposed that his disciples fight with me, and junior brother Chu was the first to stand up, but I saw that junior brother Chu was weak, so I told the truth and didn't want to bully him." Master Ning originally agreed. "I didn't expect junior brother Chu to roll on the ground and yell, and insisted on fighting with me," he said with a simple bitter smile. Chapter 334 Quirk. "So I had to spar with him," Gu Yixin sighed. "Little Dowdy is weak is really arrogant if someone else says it. But when Gu Yixin says it, it just feels right." "Then you must be angry too." Duan Xianan still didn't believe it. "Otherwise why did you hit him so hard?" The little Dowdy was stabbed 3 times and 6 holes in the battle with a gun spirit. It was a hot topic in Jiazhou for a while, and everyone knew it. "Brother Duan, you don't know this," Gu Yixin explained seriously. "Junior brother Chu has a quirk. He hates others to hold back when sparring with him. He can't be satisfied without being ruthless." "You still say that?" Hong Fan was puzzled. Chu Lui's face appeared in his mind. To be honest, his facial features are quite handsome. But what often makes people ignore his facial features is his expression. Generally speaking, he is very calm, and in his calmness, he is determined, and in his determination, he is unpredictable and jumpy. In short, he doesn't look like a normal person. When you put it that way, it does seem to be the case. Hong Fan stroked his chin, uncertain. "It's absolutely true," Gu Yixin said with certainty. "This is what senior sister Yuan told me privately before I went on stage. She also said that the healing power of the Shura Fighting Sutra is miraculous, and asked me to kill him, and nothing would go wrong." "Oh," Wu Yuan and the other 4 nodded repeatedly. It was like people in later generations hearing the secret gossip of a star. Hong Fan immediately knew that the above was all fabricated. He could fully imagine how desperate Yuan Lingsu, as the receptionist, felt when she saw Chuloi throwing a tantrum in front of the VIPs. Hong Fan reached out to wipe his face to hide his smile. What's wrong? Is there something wrong? Gu Yixin looked at his strange expression and hesitated. No, it's very good, too good. Hong Fan took off his hand, revealing a serious and meticulous face. Brother Chu and I have a close relationship. I just thought that he is such a person. The harder he is beaten, the more comfortable he feels. Next time you see him, you must stab him harder, so that he will take advantage of it. Everyone at the banquet believed what he said and exclaimed, he is indeed the most powerful among the 10 classics and he deserves the nickname of Dowdy. At this moment, a warrior in leather armor came in. The chattering stopped. Qian Dianxing's injuries have been treated, he reported to Jiu Yuanke. It's mainly because her intestines were broken. With her cultivation and the medicine, she will be fully recovered in more than half a month, Jiu Yuanke nodded. Qian Dianxing is not an ordinary captive. I heard that since she was on the top 3 in May, she has been qualified to attend the highest level meetings of the Tang family. Killing her will do more harm than good. Given the importance the Tang family attaches to her, they may be willing to exchange her for a large amount of gold, he replied, stroking his forehead, which was higher than that of ordinary people. More than that, Duan Xianan showed a rough smile. Tang Shengwang is old, and it is hard for her to make progress. The future of the Tang family depends on her, otherwise, the old cunning Tang would not lose his temper. Everyone nodded. Since we can't kill her, but we are reluctant to let her go, we have to lock her up first. Chang Yimin concluded, these miscellaneous matters have always been arranged by him. But her cultivation, he looked at Duan Xianan. Don't worry, the latter replied. 4 of her 5 marks were destroyed, and the only remaining one is the pure thought, and the real thing is still in Duanli City. In addition, I have used my own method to seal her Danshan key gate. As long as I check and fill in the gaps every 6 or 7 days, she will not be able to open it. These words gave Chang Yimin a reassurance. The Yingshan courtyard at the end of the town has just been cleared out, and there are 8 good rooms. Why not place them there first, he suggested, and then looked at Hong Fan, Wu Yuan and the other 5. In addition, Chang has an unwelcome request. It stands to reason that with the fighting power of Qian Dianxing, even if the Danshan is sealed, at least a master should be found to take care of it, but our army has few martial arts masters and we are really short of manpower. I wonder if you are willing to stay in the same courtyard temporarily to prevent Qian Dianxing from causing trouble. Chang Yimin was naturally making a good plan. And Hong Fan and his friends were not the kind of people who put on airs, so they readily agreed. The atmosphere at the banquet became more and more harmonious. When the banquet ended at the hour of Su, Hong Fan got up from the roof and saw that Longqiu town had sunk into the night. In the dark world, only a silver moon hung on the zenith and the center of the lake, facing each other in silence. 3 days later, July 14th. 2 days have passed since the beginning of autumn, and there are still 5 days before the end of the 3 dog days. This is the hottest time of the year. Of course, whether the weather is hot or not makes little difference to warriors. When the cock crowed, Hong Fan sent Wu Yuan and his 4 companions out of the town. They were original Yi knights, and they came to Huaiyang with the spirit of drawing swords to help when seeing injustice on the road, and they didn't want to stay in a peaceful place for a long time. Hong Fan sent the people away, and the sky was just getting bright. Outside the yard, the soldiers who were monitoring Tang Xingqing happened to change shifts and saluted him respectfully. In the early morning, when the sun is rising, it is the best time to practice boxing. For more than 2 years, Hong Fan has never missed the 3 daily foundation building boxing sessions arranged by Hong Li. Today is no exception. The wind from the boxing is whistling, and the breath is exhaled and the sound is made. It was not until Tang Xingqing in the west wing pushed open the window and glared at him in her coat that Hong Fan stopped awkwardly and went back to his room to sit quietly and draw in the air. He claimed to be a well-educated person. When he was practicing instant steps in Chori Mansion, he would order his subordinates to give gifts to the neighbors to apologize. But Tang Xingqing was obviously not so easy to fool. Not long after, a middle-aged woman brought 2 breakfasts in a basket. Tang Xingqing's portion was very small, and it was sweet liquid food. After eating, she took a nap as usual. Hong Fan took a bucket of well water to take a shower. He noticed that the wound on his shoulder had formed a mature scab and could move without any hindrance. Then, there was nothing else. Traveling alone, there were not so many household affairs. Limited by the realm of heaven and man, there was no point in practicing hard. However, At 8 o'clock in the morning, Hong Fan was rarely free. In the past 3 days, the Beisheng army seemed to have forgotten about him. Apart from delivering food, medicine, and sending people to wash clothes, there were no instructions at all. Hong Fan thought about it for a while and knew that this was natural. It was true that the Beisheng army was short of people. But Hong Fan was less than 20 years old and had no experience in governing the people and the army. As a newcomer, Su Yuntao and Chang Yimin could not give him the burden directly. Chu Yuanke was in charge of the high-level military forces of the entire army, so he must have no shortage of things to do, but it was not appropriate to tire out a wounded Xianjiao on the list. It was a quarter before noon. Hong Fan could not hold back and planned to go out to find something. He found a mansion he had visited a few days ago. The guard had seen him before and let him in directly. There was no one in the main hall. Hong Fan walked into the second hall and smelled the rich aroma of food wafting from the east. Probably that was the direction of the kitchen. Walking back along the side corridor, he heard the sound of chopsticks hitting a porcelain bowl across the corner. Hong Fan was just about to ask someone about this, but when he looked over, he saw Gu Yixin squatting on the stone steps under the eaves, eating rice with a big bowl. He was wearing the same straw sandals, cloth pants and short jacket, but the ochre color had changed to light gray. In the Jinhei Hong family, anyone who eats like this, even a child, will be beaten if seen by the elders. But Gu Yixin obviously didn't think there was anything wrong. Chapter 335, First Class Event. So it's Brother Gu who's here, Hong Fan said with a smile. He glanced into the bowl. There was white rice underneath, and on top was boiled water spinach and 3 palm-length pieces of white cut pork. Most of the rice had been eaten, but only half a piece of pork was missing. Gu Yixin saw Hong Fan and quickly stood up, but his mouth was full of food, so he nodded as a greeting. My injuries are almost healed, and I want to find Bai Shengguang and others to ask if there is anything I can help with, Hong Fan said with a smile. I don't know where they are, Gu Yixin chewed and swallowed for a while, and replied. But there is one important thing you can definitely help with. What is it? Hong Fan asked immediately. The rice will be harvested in the fields in the next 2 days, Gu Yixin grinned. Harvesting rice, Hong Fan was a little confused. As a master at the peak of the power realm, the major events he expected could be war, assassination, interception, and intelligence. The only thing he didn't think of was harvesting rice. Yes, isn't rice harvesting a big deal? Gu Yixin replied as a matter of course. Autumn harvest is the most important event in the world. This was beyond Hong Fan's expectation. But even the strongest warriors had to admit that this was not wrong. Hong Fan nodded silently. Great, since you are willing to help, come to the town entrance to wait for me at sunrise tomorrow, Gu Yixin said, and squatted down to continue eating. The moon sets and the sun rises, and it seems that I just touched the pillow. On the day of autumn harvest, the atmosphere in Longqiu town is very different from usual. The morning glow has not faded completely, and the dark-skinned farmers have already gone out, as agile as if they are going to the battlefield. The sickles are polished to shine. The linen is tied tightly on the top of the head to protect against the sun. The overly scorching sun is also one of the enemies. When Hong Fan arrived, Gu Yixin was already waiting. This time he put on a linen robe over his short coat and held a gun in his hand. This was the first time Hong Fan saw Gu Yixin's soldiers. The wooden pole was 2 meters long, obviously new. The spearhead was a foot long and narrow, with blades on both sides, and it looked like it was often polished. Looking at it from a close distance, it had no murderous aura, nor did it exude any chill. Is this the spear often mentioned on the Xianjiao list? Hong Fan asked. Yes, the spearhead was picked up on the ancient battlefield, and later matched with a wooden handle, Gu Yixin answered. What's its name? Hong Fan asked again. What name? Gu Yixin didn't understand what he meant. I mean the name of the spear, Hong Fan pointed. Gu Yixin laughed immediately. A spear is just a dead object, how can it have a name? If you want to call it on weekdays, just say mine, his, this one, that one. Isn't that enough? He rested his spear on the ground and pointed to the north with his chin. Let's go. These 2 days are precious, and it's important to go to the fields to work. Gu Yixin led the way. Hong Fan followed him, and followed the 3 or 2 people stream, walking towards the rice fields behind the town. Between the fields, the leaves and stems of the millet dried up, the grains hardened, and the bright yellow ears drooped deeper. The mud at the bottom of some fields was cracked by the sun. Why is there no water in the rice fields? Hong Fan was surprised. It is said that wheat is grown in Liangzhou, and it is true, Gu Yixin smiled. It is true that rice fields need to store water, but generally only for 3 months, and the water must be released when the ears emerge. In my hometown of Shengzhou, fish are also raised in the mountain terraces, usually carp. The water depth is no more than 3 inches, and the fry grows to 3 or 4 inches in 3 months. It is delicious to smoke them. He stepped on the ridge of the field with straw sandals, as if he had returned home, and his voice was much lighter and smoother than usual. In the distance, the farmers scattered to the left and right, and had already thrown their sleeves to work. Only behind the two of them were there still many people gathered. Let's do it too, Gu Yixin spoke anxiously, motioning everyone to get out of the way, unloading the gun from his shoulder, and going into the field. Before Hong Fan could come to his senses, a spear shot out quickly, just cutting off the rows of rice, leaving neat stubble. There was a burst of praise in the wind. After the second and third shots, the onlookers had dispersed and went about their own business. Obviously, this scene was no longer new. For a moment, only Hong Fan was left on the ridge of the field, so that he felt like a mixed color in a painting and a noise in a call. Brother Gu, what do you want me to do? He asked eagerly. I heard that you can control the sand freely, and your changes are far better than those of human hands, Gu Yixin suggested. Why don't I cut it, and you sort and bundle it behind me? Hong Fan agreed immediately. This was not a difficult task. He learned from the farmer in the field next door, rolling up the sand flow and combining the millet stalks into bundles one after another. The two cooperated, and their efficiency was comparable to that of large agricultural machinery in their previous lives. Soon, they had cleared more than 10 acres of land. When Hong Fan looked back again, the fields he had walked through were full of old women and children picking up ears of grain. Mechanical labor makes people concentrate. It was not until the sun rose to the middle of the sky that the two of them took their first break. Beside the official road, there was still more than half a tank of well water left in the water tank that had been filled in advance, and a gourd ladle was floating in it. Gu Yixin drank a ladle himself and scooped another ladle to pass to Hong Fan. After the cold water went down their throats, the two of them found a shade on the ridge of the field and sat with several old farmers. Lunch was 6 hard pancakes, no different from everyone else. The sun is too strong, and the food will go bad if it is exposed to the sun for 3 or 4 hours, Gu Yixin explained, handing over 3. Hong Fan waved his hand and took it indifferently. With a burst of Yanlu Jin, the pancakes were steaming hot. After heating up his own 6 pancakes, he helped the others and received a few extra wrinkled and restrained smiles. The pancakes were quite delicious. But Hong Fan just ate 2 bites and couldn't eat any more. The child who was picking up ears of grain next door was holding a cold pancake and looking at him eagerly. A warrior doesn't need this meal. He simply stopped eating and stood up to take care of them one by one. After a short rest of half an hour, the afternoon work continued as usual. The millet was cut and bundled, and then transported to the threshing ground in various ways: shoulder carrying, cart pushing, donkey carrying. Just after the arrival of Shenshi, Duan Xiaonan also flew down from the sky. Under the attention of everyone, he carried the bundles of millet that were as big as a small hill to and fro between the field and Longqiu, and his efficiency was extremely high. However, after only 5 or 6 trips back and forth, this only Yuanzi of the Beisheng army was tripped by something and did not come back. Are you going to thresh? Hong Fan asked Gu Yixin. Not so fast, the latter replied. The millet will ripen after being cut, and it needs to be piled up for 10 or 8 days before it is put on the field, so that the yield can be higher. After that, it is dried, and then threshed with animals. The millet is needless to say. The straw is also a treasure, and it must be piled up and stacked, which is useful in the cold winter, Gu Yixin explained patiently. Hong Fan listened with relish. In his 2 lives, he had never been involved in agricultural production. After a day of work, it was as if he had discovered a second world. A world buried under the extraordinary martial arts, supporting the heaven and earth. As Gu Yixin said, farming is the most important and basic thing. However, according to what he has heard and seen in the past 2 years of Hong Fan, this matter is isolated from warriors. Crops are to the people as the people are to warriors. Or even worse. Farmers still need to take care of crops, weed and fertilize, but warriors don't need to consider things other than violence. Those things will be taken care of by another group of mortals for them. 2 quarters after the Su hour, 7:30 p.m., The sun melted in the clouds and died to sunset. A day's work during the busy farming season ended here. Chapter 336, Supergroup. The official road was briefly busy. People were returning home. The setting sun was leaning against Zulin Mountain. 2 young warriors were at the end. Have you been doing farm work like this since you started practicing martial arts? Hong Fan asked. I did it a few years ago. After all, my family has 20 mu of land and I am the fastest worker in the family, Gu Yixin replied. Then when I was 19 years old, I was on the Xianjiao list. The local martial arts academy gave me money every month, so I stopped doing it. Then why are you doing your old job now? Is there no point in practicing martial arts? Hong Fan made a joke. No, Gu Yixin seemed not to hear the ridicule. At the beginning, practicing martial arts seemed to solve all problems, so I made special progress, but later I found that it was not the case. He used his spear to support the ground again and again, making it like a crutch. Since people are planting the fields in Longqiu town, there will be people harvesting them. In fact, I am not needed, but when things are not going well, it is especially easy to calm down when you are with the crops. You come from a wealthy family, so you probably don't feel this way. Gu Yixin glanced at Hong Fan. It wasn't before, but I feel a little today, the latter said frankly. The two chatted casually. When they walked back to Longqiu town, it was half dark and smoke was floating everywhere. At the gate of the town, the dogs of each family were waiting under a few big locust trees. When they saw their owners coming from afar, they pricked up their ears and wagged their tails. The dogs barked loudly, and everyone went back to their homes. Gu Yixin sent Hong Fan back to the alley outside Yingshan courtyard and stopped to thank him. Thanks to you today, I thought you wouldn't be willing. In fact, there are not many warriors in Beisheng army who are willing to go to the fields. Some do it occasionally just to please me and Brother Duan. He rarely talked much, and stopped before he finished his words. I'm not saying they're bad. This explanation seemed superfluous. Gu Yixin scratched the back of his neck in embarrassment. Are you going tomorrow? He returned to his usual dull demeanor and asked. Yes, if there's nothing else, why not? Hong Fan replied immediately. Okay, I'll join you tomorrow. Gu Yixin smiled clearly, and when he saw that Hong Fan's long gown had lost its luster due to the dirt, he patted his arm affectionately. His movements were a little restrained, as if he was worried about being out of line. At this moment, Hong Fan could roughly guess how a farmer's son felt after becoming a Xianjiao, in a circle of aristocratic families. The moon rose over the low wall of the alley. The cold light soaked the spearhead. Hong Fan once again looked at this weapon that ranked first on the Xianjiao list. The spear blade was stained with the grass clippings and dry mud, and the sharp edge of the lethal weapon could not be seen. Gu Yixin also noticed it. This spearhead is strong, just wash it and apply some oil later. He didn't care. No, I just think more and more that this gun should have a name, Hong Fan said firmly. Gu Yixin didn't understand what he meant. Other warriors' weapons have names, and most of them have inscriptions, Hong Fan insisted. In comparison, your gun can kill people, cut rice, and even stab Cao Yuang and Chu Li. It deserves a good name. As he said this, his mind began to race. However, Gu Yixin still shook his head. Names are used to distinguish. How can there be so many good and bad? Gu Yixin's gun, isn't it enough? He asked seriously. This rhetorical question actually blocked the 3 or 4 names and 5 or 6 gun inscriptions that Hong Fan had thought of in his mind. Hong Fan couldn't help but nod. Enough, more than enough, he pondered inside. There is no better. When Hong Fan returned to the yard, it was already past the hour of Su, 8 o'clock in the evening. The blue bricks in the yard had been swept, and the gathered dust was piled under the camphor tree in the corner of the yard. On the stone table by the door, there was a basket, which probably contained dinner brought by the servants. Hong Fan picked up the basket and walked through the courtyard. The door of the left wing was open. He wanted to look straight ahead, but he heard a few sounds of wood fibers tearing. The movement seemed a little deliberate. Hong Fan turned his head and saw Tang Xingqing sitting on a small wooden stool inside the threshold, tearing a red vine in the light. Her long hair was tied on the side of her face, she had no makeup, and her fair skin was a little less bloody. She was undoubtedly a beauty. What are you doing? Hong Fan asked. Tang Xingqing looked up at him, as if she had not noticed anyone entering the yard before, and then pointed at the camphor tree. That's a camphor tree, Hong Fan replied in an introductory tone. Tang Xingqing paused while peeling the vine, and tried hard to hold back the eye roll that was about to come out. I swept the whole yard today, which took an hour, and now I'm repairing the broom. She had to take the initiative to publicize her achievements. Hong Fan naturally noticed it. Under Tang Zinking's feet, the roasted and softened bamboo branches were combed into bundles and tied neatly. As for the red rattan that was torn into strips, it was obviously used to tie the bamboo bundles to the broom handle. You, a young lady from a noble family, can actually do this? Hong Fan asked, sitting down on a rattan chair in the yard. Young lady from a noble family, Tang Zinking said with disdain. Did you hear my second grandfather say the daughter of the Tang family? I was born as a concubine's daughter. After I was 10 years old, I did all kinds of odd jobs except working in the fields, from not even being able to participate in the ancestral temple, to being the focus of a country's noble family. It only took 4 years, she said with a sigh, but her face was proud. Hong Fan nodded in understanding on the rattan chair. You know what I'm talking about. Tang Zinking raised her chin. Of course, Hong Fan replied. I am a bastard of the Hong family, so I know all you are talking about. Humph. Tang Zinking did not appreciate these words, but sneered. She obviously did not think that the Jinhei Hong family could be compared with the Duanli Tang family. Hong Fan was not angry either. And I have seen the daughters of wealthy families who are held in high regard, and they are definitely not the same as you, he added. Are you talking about Shen Tixin of the Shen family in Zijing? Tang Zinking guessed. With Hong Fan on the Xianjiao list, the matter of Washeng Garden had long been known to all Kyushu. Yes, it is Shen Tixin, Hong Fan replied. Shen Tixin. It is said that she is the most beautiful woman in Liangzhou and even in the world. Tang Zinking repeated the name, and it seemed as if 10,000 ants were crawling in her heart. Who is more beautiful, her or me? She finally couldn't help asking. Humph. Hong Fan did not answer, but sneered. With a tight sound, Tang Zinking tore the red vine in her hand apart, took a few deep breaths, and then calmed down. In short, I am different from those young ladies of aristocratic families who were born with a silver spoon in their mouths. She lowered her eyes and muttered in a low voice. Although you are also a bastard, you are still a man because of your destiny. At the age of 14, I almost couldn't enter the clan school. I knelt in front of the clan elders for half a night in the heavy snow. At the age of 15, the monthly ki boosting powder was stolen by the housekeeper, and I had to go into the mountains alone to dig herbs. At the age of 16, I used half of an old iron pliers to grind my first flying sword. 3 years later, I am now 19 years old and can attend the meeting with the elders of the clan, Tang Zinking said while exerting force on Hong Tang. It was as if she was proving herself in another reckless way after losing the duel. In addition to Xingyu, there were only 2 people in the courtyard at this time. The words were soft so that the guards outside the door would not hear. When Tang Zinking listed her glorious achievements, she even frowned, trying to make her beautiful face less childish. Although in Hong Fan's opinion, this behavior itself was very childish. Are you listening? Tang Zinking asked suddenly. I am. Hong Fan smiled. He didn't think there was anything abrupt about the other person's life experience. As a genius, it is natural to be able to do what others cannot. From Li Hemming of the previous generation to Gu Yixin, Chu Lei, Su Pifeng and even Hong Fan himself of this generation, each of them, whether good or evil, can be seen at a glance. So, what did you ask me for? Hong Fan asked. I didn't ask you, you stopped by yourself, Tang Zinking defended. Oh, Hong Fan picked up the bamboo basket and stood up to leave. Shisha, Tang Zinking was really angry and stopped him. This time I really didn't stop by myself, Hong Fan said, stopping to look. Tang Zinking's cheeks flushed slightly. I want to ask you, when it comes to the word ask, she rarely has her little shyness. Am I really only as strong as the 98th on the Xianjiao list? As soon as she said this, Tang Zinking seemed to feel a little childish and began to explain hesitantly. The last Xiantian on the list is now ranked 74th, that is to say, besides you, there are 22 warriors of the same realm who are under 24 years old and have a higher combat power than me. She pinched a cane and her breathing was slightly rapid. Hong Fan looked at this 19-year-old girl who was still lingering. The gorgeous black and gold skirt and pants were damaged and stained with blood, and had been replaced long ago. She was wearing a dress made of white silk now. It was slightly old and simple, but it was already the best in Longqiu town. The lights were on the side, illuminating her dress and adding fluffy golden light. The moonlight flowed down, wet her hair, and shone with a faint silver glow. At this time, Tang Zinking was not a 1,000-point star who only believed in strength. She was just a young girl who never gave up. P.S. 2,600 words. Considering my terrible update volume, is it considered a big chapter? Chapter 337 Repairing the Grave. You are definitely very strong, and your character is also strong. Hong Fan sat down on the rattan chair again, and in his mind, he recalled the image of Tang Xingqing enduring the severe pain to dig out a broken sword from her stomach. She was willing to sacrifice her life and had a will as strong as iron. For ordinary people, this is a very remarkable quality. But for a genius, it is just a standard. From what I have seen, the Sithai of the same level of cultivation in Liangzhou Xiangwu Academy are far less powerful than you. Hong Fan stroked his chin and recalled. But if it is a genius, he counted his acquaintances one by one. Chu Loi and Shen Yubo are both innate, not to mention them. Finger Thunderbolt Xiao Hanhei came from the Jinsi sect, and manipulating metal is like instinct for him. Unless you change your flying sword with special materials in advance, you will probably be defeated if you meet him. Tang Xingqing nodded when she heard this. This is the restraint of the skills, not the personal level. What about the red-faced god? She asked. Su Pi Fen. Hong Fan couldn't help sighing when he mentioned this name. The giant spirit's fighting style is tough and wild, ignoring the injuries on the flesh level, but his ability is more monotonous than yours. If it's a head-on duel, he will rush close to you despite your assassination, and I'm afraid the life and death will be decided in a few breaths. He didn't say who will live and who will die directly. Tang Xingqing was not stupid enough to ask. There is also Aos Hiji who has fought with me. He was ranked 88th before. When mentioning this person, Hong Fan's tone became more and more considered. I fought with him once, but now I think about it, I think he held back. This person's water-dissolving true ki is very strange. It easily suppressed the cloud drop ice condensation classic and can even compete with the sand world. Tang Xingqing's face was a little embarrassed when she heard this. Liangzhou Xianjiao, I can't compare to any of them, she asked with difficulty. No, the last one in Liangzhou is Pelangao, which is just one place ahead of you, Hong Fan replied. I've seen him in action. His killer move is the refraction mirage. He is definitely no match for you. Tang Xingqing lowered her eyebrows and bit her lip, not feeling comforted at all. There's only one place difference between 97 and 98. Besides, she had concealed her insight before. I understand. I am at the bottom of the list, she said self-deprecatingly, straightened the torn rattan skin, and tied it into a broom. Hong Fan picked up the bamboo basket and went back to the house. He finally had time to eat the dinner that had already gone cold. Due to the limitations of the times, the military operations of Huaiyang State were greatly affected by the seasons. This influence was not only the weather of cold and hot weather, but also included spring planting and autumn harvest. Therefore, throughout July and August, the Beisheng army did not have any large-scale war plans. After 3 days of harvesting, it was 6 or 7 days of drying. At the beginning of the last 10 days of July, the scorching sun dried out the first batch of drier rice ears. The next job was threshing. There are many ways to separate rice grains from rice ears, but the essence is nothing more than beating. Small households use square wooden barrels, while large households rent pedal-type wooden threshers. The iron ring rotates, and the plates spin. It sucks in the rice ears and spits out the golden currency of life. 7 days later, except for a small part of the newly harvested rice that is stored in the cellar, most of the rice needs to be husked. This is the most arduous work during the busy farming season. Fortunately, pounding rice no longer requires manpower. 2 streams flow into Yishan Lake, and several mills are built in the fast-flowing water of the stream. Outside the mill, the water wheel is either lying or standing, driving the stone mill through the wheel axle, and repeatedly grinding. July 27th. Gu Yixin went to the depths of Tingshan alone with a gun to hunt a brown bear species that killed people. Hong Fan also exerted his little talent. With the power of the Life Star, he built a reservoir for each mill in a few days, and set up a gate with adjustable flow at the water inlet and outlet. In this way, not only can the rotation speed of the water wheel be adjusted, but it also alleviates the impact of the river water on the mill to a certain extent. That night, before the clouds dispersed, the two reunited in Longqiu town. It was originally a tiger 100 miles to the east. It was frightened by the storm and fled to our place, Gu Yixin said slowly. It has thick skin and flesh, weighing 2,000 pounds, under the fur is all knotted muscles, and it didn't fall down even after I shot it in the throat. He was squatting on the stone steps as usual, holding a porcelain bowl in his hand, with a large piece of roasted meat covering the rice. "It must be very strong, you can taste it," Hong Fan nodded while chewing the meat tendons in his mouth. He was also squatting, wearing the same short coat as Gu Yixin, which didn't hang down to the ground. People who do their jobs wear the same clothes, there is a reason for that. The two were halfway through their meal when they saw a figure passing by on the roof. Not long after, Duan Xiaonan strode over from the corridor with a large plate and sat down on the stone steps. "Oh, this is a special treatment," Hong Fan glanced at the steaming plate. Inside was a huge bear paw that had just come out of the pot. "It happened to be a good time, it happened to be a good time, haha." Duan Xiaonan was very proud. He glanced at the whole bear paw for a few times, and simply threw away his chopsticks, grabbed it with his bare hands and put it into his mouth. The colorful clouds gradually hid under the roof. The three of them ate and talked. Because the bear meat was really delicious, they ate more and talked less, and seemed to be talking incoherently. With a slurp, Duan Xiaonan sucked the last bone and suddenly talked about Wu Yuan. "Today, I saw the 4 people of Shuangdao Benlai coming back at Tingshan Pass. Did he change his mind?" Hong Fan asked. "That's not the case," Duan Xiaonan replied. On the way, they met the Xianfeng army escorting people, and they intercepted 20 people and sent them over. After the people were sent, they replenished water and food in the pass, and then set off again. Hearing this, Hong Fan's question, which had been suppressed by the autumn harvest, came up again. "I heard people say that the conscription in corvée lasted for more than 10 years. He scraped the last few grains of rice from the bottom of the bowl and asked directly. "A county as big as Pang County now takes away nearly 100 households a month, about 200 or 300 people, but the Xianfeng army captures people by family and household, and does not reject the elderly, the weak, the sick and the disabled. It is clear that they don't care about labor. It is said that the king of Huaiyang is arrogant and extravagant. What does he build that requires so many people? Is he building a tomb for himself at such a young age?" Hong Fan said sarcastically. Gu Yixin chewed slower. He couldn't eat the last 2 mouthfuls of rice in the bowl. "You don't know," Duan Xiaonan turned his face and was full of seriousness. "But it's almost like building a tomb," he chuckled again. "I'll take you to see it tonight." Longqiu town is more than 400 miles away from Yanlan King City, with 2 strong passes and 5 large cities in between. But for a warrior in the Yuanzi realm, obstacles that prevent him from taking off are bullshit. After a while, it was 8 p.m. The sun had already set for a long time, and the night had awakened the stars. Above was a crescent moon, and 3 figures were speeding through the clouds. Duan Xiaonan had reached the 4th level of Yuanzi cultivation, and even with 2 burdens, he could still maintain a speed of more than 200 kilometers per hour. After half an hour, most of the 400 miles had been covered. "Yunlin City is coming," Duan Xiaonan reminded. Hong Fan did not reply. Without anyone saying anything, he had already seen Fingwulin Mountain at the end of the world. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 338 Feeding. The crescent moon was dim. The Yao River meandered under the night sky, like the earth's thick black hair. It was still dozens of miles away from Yanlan City. Hong Fan stepped into the void and looked into the wind, and saw that the city walls were as narrow as a thin line, and the buildings were broken like rubble. As far as he could see, there was a single peak, adjacent to the city, rising from the ground. In addition to Fengyinding, this mountain would not have a second name. Because from the mountainside up, the high-speed swirling storm accumulated like a disk, a full 5 or 6 miles high. When it approached within 20 miles, Hong Fan sensed the disorder of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Violent, oppressive, deadly, and even destructive. After sensing for a while, he even detected negative human emotions such as anger and resentment. Duan Xiaonan went all the way forward, crossed the sky under the cover of the night, and fell into the city. After passing the Yanlan city wall, Hong Fan looked up and saw that the storm was getting bigger and bigger, almost covering half of the sky. Huaiyang Wangchang was built on the Yao River. Its city is larger than Duanli, but it is late at night, so it is hard to tell whether it is prosperous or not. From north to south, the outermost part is the residential market, The middle is the spreading palace, and the last is Fenginding, separated by the tall city wall. Under the storm, Dufang revealed a rock of 600 to 700 meters. There are words engraved on the cliffs, and there is actually a couplet. One thought of Xiangang, 10,000 miles of unique wind. The horizontal banner has 4 characters, the world is free and easy. At this time, the 3 people have descended to a height of more than 100 meters, and there are still a few miles away from Fenginding. At this distance, Hong Fan can see the expansion and contraction of the wind group like breathing. The rumbling sound of the wind is hollow and vague, as if it has existed since ancient times, and it lingers in his ears all the time. With the support of the true essence, the 3 people gently landed on the top of a watchtower at the end of the palace. Let's do it here. It may be dangerous to get closer, Duan Xianan said. He stepped lightly and stepped on the glazed tiles under his feet. A few meters away, Hong Fan heard the sound of 2 people falling. Fainted, Duan Xianan said. He was referring to the guards in the watchtower. At this moment, the 3 of them were completely covered by the storm. Without looking back, Hong Fan could not see a single cloud in the sky, let alone the stars and the moon. As you can see, that is Fenginding. Duan Xianan pointed his finger sideways and introduced. Is Fengjiang in seclusion there? Hong Fan asked. That's right, Duan Xianan nodded. The top of the mountain is also the burial place of Feng Yi, the unique in the universe. This unique in the universe is well known in Dahua. He rectified the chaos during the rebellion of the 13 kings with the appearance of a martial saint and was named the first generation of Huaiyang king. So the sky-covering storm, Hong Fan speculated. Yes, it is the impermanence realm left by Feng Yi, Duan Xianan answered directly. You have already reached the level of heaven and man, and you are in charge of the fate star. You should be able to feel the extreme danger of this storm. Hong Fan had heard of the impermanence realm a long time ago, for example, the eating heart impermanence in the west of Zhanzhou and the thousand eyes impermanence in the east of Jiazhou. Based on his understanding, this is a wonder that occurs when a region is permeated with magical powers, often occurring when gods fight or powerful people fall. But this does not answer all his questions. Everyone has read the fable of the pony crossing the river in their previous lives. The river water that can drown the heavens and humans may only reach the calves of the Yuanzi Gaoduan. This group of destructive winds makes no difference to you or me. Duan Xianan seemed to know what the other party was going to say. Because this wind is called the Xiangang Divine Wind, it can melt gold and bones and wear away Mount Zumi. It is one of the 10 classics that can only be comprehended after reaching the great success of the practice. Hong Fan was surprised. Is the place where the martial saint is buried so dangerous? He murmured after a while. This time Duan Xianan shook his head. No, in fact, a martial saint who dies a good death rarely forms the state of impermanence. The lingering regret after death means that he is unwilling to give up. How can a martial saint, who has the power to reach the sky and penetrate the earth, have so many unwillingnesses? And even if he does form the state of impermanence, it is not as destructive as this thing in front of him. Duan Xianan showed a heavy and cold smile. He stared deeply at the rock that went straight into the center of the storm. His eyes were so cold that it seemed as if he was looking at someone. So why is Fenginding different? Hong Fan couldn't help asking. Well, you will know when you see it. When he said this, Duan Xianan's voice was as cold as ice. In the distance, from the foot of Fenginding, a very tiny fire dragon circled the mountain. Hong Fan heard Gu Yixin crush the glazed tiles. So he also looked at it. The fire is a torch. The dragon is a procession of people. The Xianfeng army, about 300 people, fully armed, was escorting nearly 200 civilians to trek up along the path around the mountain. With Hong Fan's eyesight, he could see clearly the people's crying, trembling, and staggering. Only the sound of the wind was so loud that no other sound could be heard. Fenginding was not high to begin with, and soon the fire dragon reached the halfway point of the mountain. Slightly higher than this point, there was a flat rock platform right next to the edge of the wind group. The first group of more than 20 people were pushed upward by the tip of the gun. The sound of the storm became more and more violent. The soldiers seemed to have received an order and retreated as if they were fleeing. Then, the wind group swelled and spread downward. In just one breath, the rock platform was empty, without even a drop of blood left. Hong Fan's hair stood up. At this moment, he felt that what was blowing around him was not the wind. It was the cold breath blowing out of the teeth, the cruel chewing of invisible sharp teeth, the colorless blood, and the materialized fear. This was the only thing that could not be the wind. This is where the conscripts are going, Duan Xiaonan said softly, as if he was afraid of waking something up. Is this a blood sacrifice? Hong Fan suppressed the absurdity in his heart and asked in the same light voice. It's not that weird. Duan Xiaonan shook his head left and right, staring at Feng Guiying without blinking. It's just feeding. It has been continuous from 20 years ago to now. It was said that there were only a few batches a month before, but now it's non-stop every day. Hong Fan half opened his mouth and couldn't close it for a long time. 20 years is not a long time. But in this kind of thing, in this place, it seems too upright and high-sounding. It is not rational. What is the use of the realm of impermanence? Hong Fan swallowed his saliva and tried to analyze it further. The realm of impermanence is useless, at least I don't know, Duan Xiaonan replied. But this realm of impermanence will continue to generate the divine wind of the heavenly gang, so it is useful. To comprehend the martial arts, Hong Fan turned his face away. That's it, Duan Xiaonan nodded. The remains of the martial saint are not endless. Every strong wind generated in the impermanence realm consumes the essence left by Feng Yi. When the essence is exhausted, the impermanence realm will also perish. He pointed his finger to the sky. So these conscripted people, Hong Fan looked at the second group of people being swallowed by the storm on the rock platform, and couldn't help but look away. Yes, Duan Xiaonan was still staring. They are the nutrients fed to the remains of the martial saint, and the firewood for Feng Jiang's retreat. Crash. At this time, there was a thunder. The wind group suddenly became violent, and a light shone inside. From the middle and upper part of Lanshan, 2,000 or 3,000 meters above the ground, a white gas brighter than moonlight broke away to the east and disappeared in an instant. It was like a burp after indigestion. What is that? Hong Fan asked. He didn't know that his voice was shaking. What do you think? Duan Xiaonan almost roared. That's the wind disaster. This was the first time Hong Fan heard him angry. Chapter 339 Subversion. Hong Fan understood everything. So the wind disaster and corvée labor were actually caused by only one person. He took a deep breath to steady himself, clenching his fists tightly. That's not the case. Duan Xiaonan's tone calmed down. Feng Chengai also used up some manpower. 1/3 of this palace was newly built in recent years, and his great carriage has not yet been completed, but compared to the one on the top of Feng Guiying, Taodir is nothing. While he was talking, 5 groups of people on the mountainside had died. Some collapsed to the ground. Some knelt down and kowtowed. Some ignored the hemp ropes and rushed back down the mountain, and were then pierced by the tip of a gun. Everything was still like a pantomime, with only expressions and movements. But with a low and omnipresent whistling of the wind, it was even more creepy. About 200 a day, 5,000 or 6,000 a month, Hong Fan was forced to sit back and watch everything, and felt that his heart was lacking blood and his brain was lacking oxygen. For 20 years, human sacrifices, wind disasters, exiles, the population of 3 counties was reduced by half from 8 million, all for the enlightenment of one person's martial arts. Yes, Duan Xiaonan answered erratically, the red silk around his waist fluttering in the wind. That is the way to open the gate to heaven and become a saint through martial arts. Bullshit, Gu Yixin interrupted with a low voice. Hong Fan knew that the leader of the spear could also swear. And Gu Yixin's emotions were understood by him instantly. Based on compassion. Based on the sense of right and wrong. Based on the righteous indignation of the same kind. Even based on the judgment of interests. Hong Fan denied Feng Jiang's actions from hundreds of thousands of angles, and his distracting thoughts were like crucian carp crossing the river. There was the moral criticism of if you don't act humanely, how can you be called a saint? There was the subversive heart of united as one, change the world. There was also sadness for the misfortune and anger for the lack of struggle towards the people of Huaiyang. But in just a moment, he realized that they were all meaningless. Because morality is not an object of the real world, but a code of conduct for human beings in their common life. To put it more crudely, morality is roughly the compromise that individuals make for the needs of living in groups. But when celestial beings get along with mortals, sometimes it is not a two-way compromise, but a one-sided obedience. Because fear is an indispensable companion of mortals. Humans are afraid, so they can change themselves to adapt to the environment. Humans are afraid, so they inevitably show weakness. Hong Fan watched the 6th group of people being forced onto the rock platform and asked himself, what if I lost my life star in martial arts? What if I grew up and lived in this Yanlan city? What if there were always storms in my ears and I looked up to see Lanshan, What if I saw a flash of lightning from the top of Fengyun, which could leave a mile-wide whip hundreds of miles away? If so, even if everyone has resentment, how can they resist? Everyone can't, can I? Thinking of this, the anger in his heart disappeared, leaving only the sadness of the firewood burning into ashes. What are you thinking about? Gu Yixin saw Hong Fan trembling with the wind and asked with concern. I've thought a lot. But I don't know if I'm right. Hong Fan spoke slowly, his words were difficult to pronounce. As a class, warriors have overwhelming violence. He no longer cared about the words and sentences, nor did he care whether Duan and Gu could understand. Or it can be said to be productivity, although they usually don't produce, and the current top-down social structure of Dahua is probably the result of adapting to this situation. Everything is normal and reasonable, he laughed at himself. It's me who is abnormal. The laughter quickly broke and became hoarse, crushed by the wind. Gu Yixin didn't understand what he heard, and wanted to speak, but he couldn't say it. The wind was fierce and didn't stop for a moment. The seventh group of people were driven onto the rock platform like a flock of sheep. At this time, Gu Yixin suddenly reached out and grabbed Hong Fan's wrist. His palm was burning like fire. No, it's not always like this. Gu Yixin finally managed to spit out half a sentence. I'm not. Brother Duan is not either. He didn't know if he understood it correctly, and even stuttered because of it. Finally, Hong Fan's rapid breathing slowed down. He clenched his fists again after loosening his 5 fingers. The storm swelled and swallowed again. Everyone was fed into the realm of impermanence. The long dragon lit by torches went down the mountain. Storm, Lanshan, Fengyun, Huiyang Palace. Everything was normal, as if nothing had happened. Only the suffocating silence enveloped the 3 people on the glazed tiles. Duan Xiaonan was the first to speak. Wait a moment, I'll be back soon. He slipped down the watchtower. About 3 or 4 minutes later, Duan Xiaonan came back. He went to the palace kitchen to get some food, a whole jar of Buddha jumps over the wall stew, 2 roast chickens, and half a suckling pig with crispy skin. These dishes were all hot, and they were obviously simmering on the fire in case of emergency for the king of Huiyang. In addition to the hot dishes, Duan Xiaonan also took 3 jars of good wine with mud seals. Everyone drink half a jar of wine first, and you each take a roast chicken. I'll work hard to finish this suckling pig, he ordered in the tone of an elder brother. This time Gu Yixin did not refuse. The 3 of them ate very quickly. Hong Fan drank half a jar of wine, and his stomach felt full, and his body regained some warmth. He started to deal with the roast chicken again. The chicken was hard to taste. But the secretion of saliva and the slowly increasing sense of fullness made Hong Fan regain some vitality. As for the bone rack, the 3 of them threw it directly down the watchtower. Anyway, the building was too high, the night was too dark, and the wind was too strong, so no one would know. Half a quarter of an hour later, the Xianfeng army escorting the sacrifice had withdrawn far from the palace. Hong Fan regained the strength to talk. Why was the matter on Fengyun not announced to the world? He asked the first question after the meal in a hoarse voice. Duan Xiaonan laughed when he heard it. There's only one impermanence realm on Fengyun in the world? Only the Feng family has 10 classics? Only Feng Jiang wants to be a martial saint. He answered 3 questions first. Besides, how to make an announcement? Who'll listen? The big man wiped the lard from his mouth with a red silk at his waist and took another sip of wine. Hong Fan was speechless. When he asked this question according to his emotions, he immediately felt that he was being stupid. In Africa, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East in his previous life, how many people knew about many things and how many people paid attention to them before they were exposed? What's more, Dahua has no media except for the official reports and internal references. Information can be spread by word of mouth or by copying on paper. When Gong Heng talked to him about the bad years in Huiyang, the focus was only on the impact on business, not the hardship of the people. Brother Hong, people will change, Duan Xiaonan sighed with emotion. When I was a kid, Yunlin Feng Jiang was not the first on the earth ranking. At that time, people praised him for being bright and unrestrained, like the wind under the pine trees, but aging is an incurable poison. The longer a person lives, the more afraid he is of death, so that the outer shell is not broken, but the heart inside is rotten first. He looked up at the peak covered by clouds. Living for the sake of living, breathing for the sake of breathing, I'm afraid it's better to die, right? Duan Xiaonan's voice suddenly increased. Senior Feng, what do you think? Chapter 340, Stormy. Huiyang Palace, on the top of the watchtower. Duan Xianan's question made the other two people's hearts jump. Which senior Feng? Hong Fan asked in surprise. Of course it's Feng Jiang, Duan Xianan sneered. The sound is carried by the wind. Feng Jiang, who is the top of the earth ranking and the most powerful person in the world, can hear the voices of people several miles away. What's the difficulty? You mean, he knows we are here and can hear us talking? Hong Fan asked calmly, his face slightly pale. The wind ball was slightly bright at this time. It seemed like a coincidence, but also like a response. Don't worry, Feng Jiang will not come down, and he can't take action. Duan Xianan patted Hong Fan on the shoulder and stood up with a wine jar. The upper limit of the lifespan of a celestial being is 180 years old, and he is already 182 years old. Now Feng Jiang is both in the death gate and relying on comprehending the Xiangang divine wind to prolong his life. Once the death gate is broken, the 5 decays of the celestial being will probably come immediately. How can he be willing to exchange his life with me? Duan Xianan pointed at the top of the peak with his finger wantonly, and his tone of voice left no room for doubt. The lifespan of a celestial being, the death gate, the 5 decays of the celestial being, and comprehending to prolong life. For Hong Fan, there were too many new things in these words. But he did not ask any more questions, and almost believed them unilaterally. Because Feng Jiang did not go down the mountain. Otherwise, he did not know how to face the reality of Huaiyang's state. Duan Xianan stopped talking. He untied the red silk that bound his shirt and wrapped it around his palm, then picked up the wine jar and drank. The strong wind swept non-stop. The 9-foot-long red silk was pulled straight up and flew outside the watchtower. In Hong Fan's eyes, it was as if the invisible storm had cut a tangible wound. In just 2 breaths, several liters of wine either fell into his stomach or soaked Duan Xianan's beard and chest. The wine was poured out. The wine jar was smashed. Duan Xianan turned his head and looked at the 2 juniors with a pair of piercing eyes. 2 brothers, what's wrong with 1,000 miles in one step? What's wrong with being the top of the earth ranking? Just watch me scold him. The big man exhaled a strong smell of alcohol, put his hands on his waist, and shouted angrily at the top of Feng Jiang. Feng Jiang, I am Duan Xianan, you son of a bitch dare to come down to see me. It seemed like a thunderclap in the strong wind. The majestic sound waves rushed away in the dark night, and resounded throughout the royal city in a moment. The lights in the Huaiyang palace soon lit up. An aura rose in a central palace somewhere, and the sense of pressure was slightly higher than Duan Xianan. Hong Fan knew that it must be Feng Mubei, the second best of the Feng family, the 93rd on the earth ranking, and the wind swept the clouds. Feng Jiang, don't play dumb, answer me, Duan Xianan yelled for the second time. But Feng Mubei still only guarded in front of the palace and didn't come over. Obviously he didn't understand what Duan Xianan was doing, and thought it might be a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain. After all, this man had assassinated the king of Huaiyang. The wind group was still spinning. There was no response from the top of Feng Jiang. This was natural. In the court of the king of Huaiyang, under the top of Feng Jiang, insulting the top of the earth list, who was in a closed state among the enemy's many NRs. At the first moment, Hong Fan realized how childish this behavior was. Not only childish, not only meaningless, but even fatally dangerous. Feng Jiang might die if he broke through the gate in anger, but the 3 of them would definitely not survive. But at this moment, none of this mattered. Reason was dormant for the time being. Because the yelling in the wind was like a flame, igniting Hong Fan and the strong liquor he drank. Feng Jiang, I am Chisha Hong Fan. He endured the burning eyes, stood up suddenly, and smashed the wine jar on the glazed tiles. You are honored with the title of Qianli Bubu, but you have been tied to a corpse like a dog for 20 years. Isn't it aggrieved? The question was raised like a sharp sword, cutting into the storm and night. Half of Yanlan City was awakened. Then, the 3rd wine jar was smashed on the watchtower. Hong Fan and Duan Xianan turned their heads to look. They saw Gu Yixin raised his head and stared at Feng Jiang, opening and closing his mouth several times, but couldn't curse. Duan Xianan put his hands on his hips and laughed. Say whatever you want, don't be dirty, this is not a competition. Gu Yixin nodded, hesitated for a moment, and finally spoke. Senior Feng, you have committed evil deeds and you will suffer the consequences. He was not as rude as Duan Xianan, but not as sharp as Hong Fan. Fortunately, his voice was really loud, which completely shocked the whole city. Hong Fan sensed that 2 more auras were rising in the distance like wolf smoke, slowly approaching this side. The first one was hot. It must be Gong Xiangping, the first master of the Gong family, the holder of the earthly divine weapon Ming Shen, and the Liao Yuan hero. The second one was cold. It must be Feng Manian, the second of the two Yuanzi of the Feng family, the Xiao Asafeng. The atmosphere on the top of the watchtower was a little tense. Okay, we have seen the mountain, eaten the meat, drank the wine, and scolded the people. Duan Xiaonan tied the red silk back to his waist and whispered. Before they figure out the situation, we have to run away quickly 1 against 3 and carrying 2 burdens. I will die. As he said this, he released his true energy from his palms, carrying the 2 people into the air. Above his head was a destructive storm. Under his feet was the Huaiyang King City, which was gradually lit up and in chaos. The world flew back in Hong Fan's eyes. Lanchan gradually faded away. Only a raging shout was left in the wind. Come and chase me if you dare. When Hong Fan returned to Yingshan courtyard, it was not yet Yinshi, 3 o'clock in the morning. The sky was covered with clouds, so that the dome was dark and there was no star or moon. To be honest, he didn't do anything tonight except eating, drinking, chatting and cursing. But at this moment, he just felt exhausted physically and mentally, and his eyelids seemed to be weighed down by iron. He threw off his shoes, lay down with his clothes on, and fell asleep as soon as he touched the bed. This sleep was filled with one dream after another. In the dream, he returned to the original dilapidated courtyard in Jinhei City against the strong wind. On the wooden bed, the corpses of living things were covered deep by the quilt, crushed into black and sticky blood. Under the kitchen, the flames were burning, and what was roasted was not the iron pot but the high-speed rotating metal blades. He dreamed that the red candle shed tears for people. He dreamed that the wall was built with moss. Stepping out of the room, there was still the locust tree in the yard, with its roots deeply embedded in the rocks, and it looked like iron castings against the light. The wind was still rumbling. The wind blew from the roots of the locust tree to its branches. The bark was filled with a world that had never changed for 2,000 years, horses galloping into the desert, swords drinking blood. Hong Fan suddenly woke up. He was covered in sweat, and his heartbeat was like a drum. Fortunately, the sound of the wind had finally faded away. The cool and humid air passed through his nose. Hong Fan turned over and found that it was still dark outside the window. When he walked out of the room, the ground in the yard was wet. There was a basket next to the door, and inside was the dinner that had long been cold. He realized that it was already the night of the next day, and he had slept for nearly 10 hours. With a bucket of well water, Hong Fan washed himself, changed his clothes, and then sat down on a rattan chair in the yard. As usual, there was a pleasant breeze blowing through the yard. But today it only made him jump with fear. Hong Fan couldn't sit still, and just as he stood up and was about to do a few punches, he glanced at the side room and stopped. At this moment, the door of the wing room was opened. Hong Fan turned around and saw Tang Xingqing wearing a white skirt and a cotton jacket, leaning against the door frame with her arms folded. You slept for a long time, she said, looking at him with a raised eye. Chapter 341 The Way of Martial Arts. Perhaps today's rain has exhausted last night's clouds. The sky was bright, the moon was as thin as a crescent, and countless stars clustered around it. With their light, Hong Fan could clearly see Tang Xingqing's eyebrows and eyes, which were smiling. Today is the 28th? What time is it now? Hong Fan asked. It's midnight. You slept through the whole day, Tang Xingqing replied. Today's lunch and dinner were both brought to your door, and you didn't wake up even after knocking on the door. A warrior who sleeps too deeply is the way to death, she was half reminding and half teasing. In the past, Hong Fan would have responded with a polite smile. But he couldn't smile at this moment. Tang Xingqing noticed something was wrong, stood up straight, and the 2 hairpins on her bun shook the beads. Are you healed? Hong Fan asked casually, looking at her obviously more exquisite dress. Half healed, Tang Xingqing answered immediately, and noticed that the other party was absent-minded, so he asked, What's wrong with you? Nothing, maybe. Hong Fan wanted to be perfunctory, but when the lie came to his mouth, he felt irritated. I went to Yanlan City with Duan Xiaonan last night, he said in a suddenly stiff voice. You went to assassinate Feng Chenggai. Tang Xingqing's voice rose half a degree, and even her arms were frightened. Everyone in Huaiyang knew that Duan Xiaonan had a criminal record in this regard. No, we went to see Feng Gainding, Hong Fan said firmly, looking directly at the other party. Storm Lanchan, it's an eye-opener. The yard was silent for a moment. He understood that the other party knew about Feng Gainding. Until tonight, Hong Fan did not dislike Tang Xingqing, although the latter almost executed Wu Yuan. As Du and Cheyenne said, both parties serve their own masters, one for loyalty in their hearts, and the other for the king's law above their heads. Life and death have nothing to do with personal grudges. But Hong Fan looked at her now, and his heart suddenly surged with uncontrollable anger. Do you know about Feng Guinding? His voice sank. I haven't seen it in person, but I should know everything you know, Tang Xingqing answered immediately. You knew that you also joined Cayenne Manfeng? That's amazing, Hong Fan also answered without thinking. If his previous sentence was displeased, this one was already a question. Tang Xingqing's hands hidden in her sleeves clenched into fists. Yes, I joined Cayenne Manfeng in May this year, she smiled instead. Then what do you expect me to do? When the royal court recruited me, the appointment document was signed by the name of Feng Mubei, the minister of Cayenne Manfeng. Could I have torn it up directly? She asked back. So this position must be yours, Hong Fan sneered. Tang Xingqing's sword-like eyebrows were knitted. You are the only one who says such frivolous words? If you have the ability, why didn't you bring back the head of Feng Jiang? She stepped out of the door, her expression as sharp as when she stepped on the sword box at the entrance of Duanli City. Maybe I can choose not to go, but someone from the Tang family must go. The Feng family has been established for 200 years, and the 3 counties have been respecting the royal court for 10 generations, the government office, agricultural taxes, the recruitment of warriors, the selection of talents, and even the marriages between the 4 great families. Everything has long been established. Then, she was interrupted by a rude question. Cayenne Dianxing, let's not talk about the Tang family, let's not talk about others. If I only ask you, what do you think of Feng Guinding and Feng Jiang? Tang Xingqing choked. She was finally really annoyed. Shisha, so what do you want to do when you come to Huaiyang Kingdom? Like Wu Yuan, who only cares about trivial matters, kills a county magistrate when he sees injustice, and plays the role of a knight. Tang Xingqing burst into a sharp tone. Even if the 100 Victories army invades Yunlin City, even if the Feng Guinding of Huaiyang state collapses, is it over? No, there are still countless Feng Guindings above the heads of the poor people in the world. I heard that in your hometown, in the western border of Liangzhou, many people go into the great swamp to hunt snakes and get snake gall, but the gall is never used on them. I heard that the Shura sect owns the entire Xiangpeng mountain range, and there are heavy taxes on hunting and collecting herbs in the mountains, but the name of the Shura sect is not written on Xiangpeng mountain. I heard that the Star Lord increases his power by secluding souls and taking away spirits. But aren't you still happy with it? Hong Fan couldn't say anything back for a while. Since waking up, his heart has been very confused. Bringing up this topic is a kind of uncontrolled venting. On the other side, Tang Xingqing still didn't restrain herself. The higher the warrior is, the less productive he is. He just ponders, retreats, and discusses all day long, relying entirely on others for support. Where do these supports come from and what is the cost? She questioned. You certainly won me in the battle at the street market, but you don't understand the way of martial arts. The way of martial arts is to take away what is lacking and give to what is abundant, whether you like it or not. For a martial artist, mortals are crops. Some are carefully taken care of, while others are roughly taken care of, but in any case, being harvested is the fate of crops. Her tone became more and more fierce, and her face became paler. She pressed her belly with one hand, as if an old injury had recurred. But at this point, Tang Xingqing was unwilling to stop even if she had to endure the pain. She took a big step, and when her skirt held her steps back, she grabbed it and tied a knot, then drew water from the deep well in the corner of the yard, and drank half a bucket in one breath like drinking wine. Hong Fan saw the moonlight shining on her naked calves, like forged silver. After drinking the cold water, Tang Xingqing suppressed the pain, walked to the rattan chair, and looked directly into Hong Fan's eyes. I heard that you went to the fields with Gu Yixin every day some time ago, Tang Xingqing said condescendingly. Duan Cheyenne and Gu Yixin are both from farming families, and they are rare in not forgetting their roots. There are often rumors about them doing farm work by themselves, so this time in the field, you saw several warriors of the Beisheng army, she asked. Hong Fan hesitated. Seeing this, Tang Xingqing sneered. Shisha, do you really think that you are qualified to preach to others just because you helped a few old farmers on a whim? My Tang family is a noble family. Those whose names are listed in the family tree will never have to work in the fields until they die. Her tone was arrogant. It forced Hong Fan to look up suddenly. But Tang Xingqing just sped up her speech as if her plan had succeeded. Can't you listen to this? You, the Jinhe Hong family, are far inferior to our Tang family, but how many people have worked in the fields? Hong Fan was silent. Tang Xingqing stood on tiptoe and smiled proudly. At this time of year, there may still be some rice that has not been milled, and some grain that has not been stored in a cellar. Chisha, you can still go and pretend tomorrow, but you and I both know that you can't stop your family from practicing martial arts, just like you can't stop using the sand world. There was a pause. Do you still want to ask me what I think of Feng Jiang? Then, Tang Xingqing stabbed out the last question like a sword. Hong Fan lowered his eyes dejectedly and did not answer. So she pressed her lower abdomen harder and walked back to her room slowly. Only the last two words were left in the yard. I'm not saying this to win you in words, nor to show how kind I am, and how I'm different from other martial artists. It's just that I was once a little concubine who prayed for martial arts but couldn't get it. After saying that, she slammed the door, leaving Hong Fan alone facing the stars and the moon. When dawn broke, his whole body was already cold in the night. P.S. I took sleeping pills at 12 o'clock last night, but fell asleep at 7 this morning. Old Wang, it seems that my drug resistance is maxed out. I'll just go with the flow these days. Chapter 342 Fried Peanuts. On the night of July 28th, Hong Fan sat all night. Although Tang Xingqing hid in the side room, she was probably angry and didn't sleep well. The next morning, the two met again in the yard. Tang Xingqing came out with a wooden basin, still looking haggard. She caught a glimpse of someone sitting on the rattan chair, so she raised her chin and looked straight ahead. It seemed that there was only air in the yard besides her. Under Hong Fan's gaze, Tang Xingqing went to the well to fetch water, went straight back to the house, and slammed the door again with her instep. Hong Fan watched the whole process silently. Until the sound of the door slamming in the yard, he finally couldn't help laughing. Perhaps because of her young age and the fact that she had experienced a lot, the Tang family girl was extremely sophisticated in some aspects, but childish in other aspects. After this commotion, the freezing coldness on Hong Fan's body faded away by a large margin. He exhaled the turbid air in his lungs, rubbed his face with the power of fire in his palms to warm it up, and took the initiative to knock on the door of the side room. Dong, dong, dong. No reply. Hong Fan held the door, guessing that Tang Xingqing was a bit like the elementary school girl classmate who had a quarrel in the previous life. Whoever spoke first after the 38th parallel was drawn probably meant surrender. So he took the initiative to speak. I'm sorry for what happened last night. After 6 or 7 heartbeats, there was a reply from inside. Humph, no need to say sorry, I'm your prisoner anyway, it's a mercy if you don't kill me. The tired voice was a bit triumphant. Hong Fan didn't care about the other party's sarcasm, knowing that this matter was over. Not long after, the peasant woman brought breakfast. Hong Fan ate it quickly and went out to pretend. After all, where there are people, there is endless work. After all, there is a shortage of unpaid workers everywhere. This time he didn't do it to help others, but just wanted to calm down through this mechanical activity with obvious results. On the first day, Hong Fan stepped on the rice-pounding hammer and said to himself, people are never equal, and the value of individuals to society is never the same. On the second day, Hong Fan repaired the small dock of Yishan Lake and thought, seeking to change the production relations must be based on changing the productivity. On the third day, Hong Fan dug the granary and nagged to Gu Yixin. Only when everyone in the world can practice martial arts can Dahua be saved. On the fourth day, Hong Fan went to the forest under Tingshan to chop wood, and was depressed that practicing martial arts cannot change the old society. Until the fifth day, Hong Fan spent half a day stacking straw, and after a full lunch, he lay on the hill like haystack to rest. Close your eyes, and there is bright darkness in front of you. The sun penetrated from all over your body. He took a deep breath, smelled the smell of autumn hay at the tip of his nose, and suddenly felt embarrassed about his stupidity in the past few days. Learning without thinking is useless. Thinking without learning is dangerous. Anyway, it is just a communication between heaven and man, and has never been to the capital, nor does it know Zulong. It is a very simple truth to avoid thinking too much when you know too little. Walking more steadily and standing higher are more important to him than anything else at this stage. Thinking of this, Hong Fan sighed, turned over, buried his sunburned face in the haystack, and let his butt kiss the sun along the sunlight. 5 days passed. The shock of witnessing the blood sacrifice at Fengyinding was finally completely calmed. Hong Fan is certainly a person who likes to look far away. He likes to use theory to guide practice, and then use practice to feed back theory. He likes to use a framework methodology to analyze even the smallest problems. But he is also a very pragmatic person. Hong Fan lay on the haystack he made with his own hands, recalling the journey he had taken after crossing. Joining the instrument supervisor, writing papers, getting to know Zhuang Liren, establishing Cheyenne hexing. Every step is to borrow strength, and every step is just to solve the problems encountered at hand, not to mention a long-term future. Completing things that match this stage at each stage of life is called accumulating small steps. If you keep taking small steps, you can reach 1,000 miles, he thought indifferently, and his mind was filled with the debate with Tang Xingqing, the unstoppable thinking of the past few days, and the wild boar-like thinking. Things couldn't be clearer. These are just stresses when there is nothing he can do. The 29th year of Zheng, the 10th day of the 8th month. Huiyang State, outside Longqiu town. The autumn is high and the clouds are light, and wild geese are floating in the sky. At 2 p.m., Hong Fan asked Gu Yixin to take him to a spacious place where he could practice martial arts. So the latter took him to the military camp martial arts field outside the town. This is a wide rammed land of 100 feet long, just like Liangzhou, surrounded by earth walls on all sides, leaving only 2 entrances and exits on the north and south sides. On all 4 sides of the venue, military flags embroidered with the big words 100 victories fluttered in the wind, and officers in groups of 3 or 2 each occupied a place for practice. But they all recognized Gu Yixin and did not dare to come up to disturb him. Hong Fan came here to finalize a new way of killing. After 4 months of entering the realm of heaven and man, he had thoroughly mastered the burning sand and had a foundation for further progress. I have faced many on-one or one-on-one battles before, but it is different here in Huiyang. Hong Fan sat down on the stone pier and said, I need a killing method that can cause large-scale devastating blows to multiple enemies centered on warriors in a battlefield environment, I mean the army. Gu Yixin looked solemn, and it was obvious that he was listening very seriously. Hong Fan then became more involved. Range strikes and changes are the specialties of the sand world. The control of objects by the destiny star is based on authority, and it is easy to cover a large area, but it is very troublesome to increase the lethality of a single point, especially once the distance is far. Whether it is precise control or speed and intensity, it means huge consumption. The fire-based exercises are just the opposite. High temperature itself means lethality, so to increase the power, you only need to increase the heat. It is nothing more than stacking the quantity and quality of true energy locally, but if the range is expanded while maintaining the lethality, its efficiency will decrease exponentially. Take the killing method of my family's inherited flame flow, the 7-step cage, as an example. This move can burn the 7 steps around the body into a high-temperature furnace, and the offense and defense are extremely sharp. It's a pity that 7 steps are only a little over 10 feet, and the range is too small. I once tried to expand 7 steps to 8 steps. The radius increased by 1/7, the volume increased by 50%, and the consumption increased by 3 times the original. But what if the two can be combined? At this point, Hong Fan paused slightly, with the corners of his mouth raised. Add fire to the sand, creating an environment with high heat and killing potential, but it does not directly act on the true key, nor does it use flowing air as a medium. His eyes lit up with excitement. Brother Gu, with your talent, you must have guessed what I mean, huh? Gu Yixin suddenly came back to his senses and gasped. Fire, combined with sand? He stuttered. Fried peanuts. Hong Fan was speechless when he heard this. Gu Yixin's words were actually a pun. He couldn't tell whether the other party was confused or smart, so he just gave a straight explanation. Well, my idea is actually like this. High temperature will naturally cause airflow, resulting in a sharp increase in heat loss and consumption, and using true key to continuously cover a large area is beyond the power realm. Why not use gravel as a high-temperature carrier and air as a natural heat insulation layer to reduce the consumption of flame flow through a sparse distribution? At the same time, I will control the sand and dust to make high-speed concentric rotations to make up for the density with speed. In this way, the utilization rate of true key will be greatly improved, the lethality will not be reduced too much, and the sustainability and range will also be guaranteed. Hong Fan couldn't help but slap his thigh when he talked about the wonderful point. Then, he saw Gu Yixin's straight eyes. P.S. Sleeping at sunrise and waking up at sunset makes it feel like living in the polar night, which is really not good. So I found a way to force my work and rest schedule back yesterday. There should be another chapter today. Chapter 343 Hot Wind Hell. The awkward silence lasted for a long time. Brother Gu, don't you have any ideas? After hearing this, Hong Fan struggled to maintain his smile. Seeing this, Gu Yixin scratched the back of his neck embarrassedly. I'm sorry, my mind is empty when I practice martial arts, and I can't think so much, he said ashamedly. Then don't you think about countermeasures when you spar with others? Hong Fan was shocked. I think so, of course I think about it. Gu Yixin's thick black eyebrows stood up. Cao Yuang's body movement is fast, so I have to move faster. Chu Jianzhi's swordsmanship is fierce, so I have to stab harder with my spear, he said it very seriously. For someone like Chu Li, one shot is not enough. I will stab him a few more times, and he will obey. Hiss. Hong Fan held his forehead with one hand and was speechless for a long time. He had never understood so deeply what it meant to talk at cross purposes. He was obviously intoxicated by the beauty of mechanism innovation, but the other party only knew how to add values. I said that I can ignore the pure damage of Blade of Wisdom by activating BKB. You said that you have 10,000 intelligence points, so you can just use a basic attack to get it done. Relying purely on numbers, he can actually dominate his peers and become the top of the Xianjiao list, Hong Fan thought silently. As he thought about it, he actually felt quite excited. The discussion could not continue. Not to mention that Gu Yixin was a dull person. He and Hong Fan were not on the same path in martial arts training. Fortunately, Duan Xiaonan came by himself not long after. Now, the few officers in the martial arts arena voluntarily left the field to show respect, and there were only 3 people left in the huge place. Hong Fan finally had an opponent for the discussion. A quarter of an hour later, Duan Xiaonan had already deeply understood the theory and mechanism of this killing method, and couldn't help but cheer loudly. Then he flew out of the field, and soon came back with a tree that one person could hug. The tree was thrown to the ground, and the newly broken roots were still covered with mud. As expected, it was pulled out by force. Let's try. Duan Xiaonan took the initiative to step back and said excitedly. Hong Fan nodded. He stood in front of the tree trunk, pulled the sand flow out of the ground, and empowered it with the innate fire spirit. In just a breath, the air around him was slightly distorted. The sand whirl drove the sand grains at 1,000 degrees Celsius to scatter in all directions, swirling at high speed with Hong Fan as the center. The trees shrouded in it immediately changed. First, the green leaves were torn off, and then the small branches were broken. Duan Xiaonan could see clearly that whether it was branches, leaves, or trunks, they were all crushed and carbonized under the impact and cutting of the high-temperature sand wind. Heat was accumulating. After a while, there was a loud bang. The tree, which was more than 10 meters long from root to branch, exploded as a whole and burned into a blazing torch. Under the dual erosion of high temperature and mechanical cutting, in just 7 or 8 breaths, the whole giant tree was peeled off layer by layer and burnt to ashes. Only a pile of broken carbon remained. Gu Yixin's eyes widened. He had never seen such a complicated and fancy killing method before. It was not until now that he understood what giving fire to sand meant. Duan Xiaonan was amazed. Even if nothing else is said, just looking at the power, it is at least a second-grade killing method of the sect. Brother Hong, how do you feel? He asked again with concern. The consumption is okay. According to the power just now, I can maintain it for about 3 minutes. If it is activated intermittently, it is enough to support a battle. Hong Fan tasted it carefully. As for the range, the maximum radius can reach 5 meters. If the power is not taken into account, it can be increased by 60% to 70%. In short, this move is very flexible to use, and the range and power can be adjusted. The only disadvantage is that once it is used, I am afraid that no one will be left alive, Hong Fan added. Duan Xiaonan looked at the carbon ash that could not be seen in its original form and nodded silently. What do you want to call this move? He asked. Hot Wind Hell. Hong Fan's voice was slightly deep, and it was obvious that he had already thought of it. This name is just right. Duan Xiaonan sighed and asked Hong Fan to do it again with the same power as before. This time, he used all his body protecting energy and stepped into the range of the Hot Wind Hell himself. After 5 breaths, Hong Fan stopped the move. Duan Xiaonan was indeed unharmed. For the power realm, the lethality of this move is extraordinary, he evaluated. A mortal who is hit by this move will surely die. A heavy armored soldier will be burned and disabled in 1 breath. The average warrior in the pure realm, unless he is practicing horizontal training or has a special body protection method, can only last for 5 breaths at most, Duan Xiaonan said and looked at Gu Yixin. When you were in the realm of heaven and man, I remember that you were ranked in the early 70s on the Xianjiao list. How would you deal with this move when you encountered it at that time? Hong Fan was also very interested in the answer to this question. I approached first, Gu Yixin answered, almost without thinking. Then use the gun. It's almost the same as not saying it, Hong Fan said disapprovingly. Duan Xiaonan also laughed. It's better to make a move to judge this kind of thing, Brother Gu. There's a wooden target over there, 5 meters away. You stab it with your heavenly and human level. He led the way. Not long after, Gu Yixin held a gun in one hand and faced the human target, and the remaining 2 stood on his left and right. Hong Fan was actually very curious about the martial arts of the top genius of the generation, but it was a pity that the previous times he saw the gun master use the gun, it was all for harvesting rice. So this time, he observed very carefully. Observe Gu Yixin's gun. Observe Gu Yixin's gun holding posture. Observe how Gu Yixin observed the human target. But Hong Fan still couldn't see the reason. If he had to say it, it would be relaxed. In short, he didn't look like a gunman, but more like a farmer planting rice in the field. Then use this target. Gu Yixin turned sideways, pointed the gun, and looked at Hong Fan. The power of the peak. Hong Fan just nodded, and before his nerves tightened, he heard the dull sound of his feet stepping on the ground. A small flat pit was formed under the rammed earth. The figure flashed by, and the spearhead pierced through the target's head. In one word, fast. It was so fast that the short spear seemed to have never left the owner's waist. Hong Fan's breath was choked, and just as he was about to look closely, he saw Gu Yixin exert force briefly. In a blink of an eye, the latter had returned to the original place. It took only half a breath to go back and forth. So fast, Hong Fan almost exclaimed. He replayed the action he just saw in his mind. It's not that he can't see it clearly, just in terms of peak speed, it is obviously inferior to the instant step. However, what surprised him was the suddenness of Gu Yixin's force and the smoothness of his gun. The extreme speed of instant step requires pre-operations such as wearing sand armor, heating compressed air, adjusting posture and accumulating power. But Gu Yixin seemed to throw himself out, and the spear, man, and step were all one. The step-throwing diamond classic is more than just fast. Duan Xiaonan saw Hong Fan's surprise and smiled. If it is not a wooden target, but a black iron target, can it be pierced? He asked Gu Yixin. Yes, the latter was stunned and gave a brief reply. Hong Fan stared at the unworn spearhead, obviously shocked. Gu Yixin was very fast, but his instant step was even faster. Gu Yixin's spear skills were very powerful, but his sand-flowing knife was even more powerful. But going straight and doing it in one go had its own indescribable refreshing beauty. Chapter 344 Vajra Wisdom. The Buzzy Vajra Classic points directly to the great way of heaven and man, and is also first class in martial arts classics. Duan Xiaonan also sighed. This is a very simple martial arts classic, without so many tricks. It only emphasizes explosive power, and it is not the same as your thousands of changes. You may not believe it, but my old brother told me that the entire Buzzy Vajra Classic only specializes in one killing method. Hong Fan confirmed with Gu Yixin in disbelief. The latter nodded and held the spearhead horizontally in front of him. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth changed slightly. Hong Fan looked carefully and saw that a very thin layer of true energy was attached to the sharp edge of the iron spear, and it felt extremely sharp just by looking at it. This killing method is called Vajra Wisdom in martial arts classics, Gu Yixin explained. Use true energy to attach to external objects to form a blade. The harder you stab, the sharper the spearhead will be. The martial arts classic only teaches this move, so I only know this. Listening to his overly simple language, Hong Fan made up the principle of this move in his mind. It was probably self-sharpening, and the greater the pressure, the sharper it would be. With your current limit, how hard can you break? He immediately became curious about the parameters of the only killing method of this first-class martial arts canon. As long as it is something, it will be fine, Gu Yixin replied. Hong Fan was stunned again when he heard it. He felt that as long as he talked about martial arts, he and the young man in front of him could not connect their brain circuits at all. What do you mean by anything is fine? Hong Fan asked dryly with empty eyes. That's right, they are all similar, Gu Yixin answered carefully. For example, Yishi's thunder mark is very hard. Cutting 100 forged steel is like cutting onions. So I will be ruthless. For example, Cao Yuang's Liu Iron sleeves are very soft, and they can't withstand a few shots, so I will be ruthless again. The two battle examples he cited are considered to be very famous in recent years. Needless to say, Liu Ai and Cao Yuang gave up the top spot after fighting with Gu Yixin. Jiguang Muviashi was ranked 29th on the Xianjiao list when the list was released last month with his Ayanshan sand cultivation level. Cao Yuang is famous for his palm and sleeve techniques. His flowing cloud sleeves are based on martial arts, not because of the extraordinary material of the clothes. Yishi's sword thunder mark is just the opposite. It is said to be the essence of thunder and is known as the Xuan level unparalleled. But both of them were indeed broken by Gu Yixin's gun. I understand. The true meaning of Vajra wisdom is to be ruthless. Hong Fan smiled and sighed. Martial arts is like this. It can be very profound or very simple. Duan Xiaonan also sighed. As long as you are fast and strong enough, you can defeat any opponent if you hit and break it. Hong Fan had to nod. Then he asked to feel the power of Vajra wisdom. With the highest solidity and density, the sand converges into a 3-inch thick shield. This is the upper limit of the defense of the desert sand armor under normal conditions. This time, please use the full strength of the Heaven Man interaction cultivation, Hong Fan asked. Gu Yixin nodded. In terms of power, the killing move of the Heaven Man interaction level is not much different from the innate one. He weighed the strength slightly, and just as he glanced at the center of the sand shield, the tip of the gun had already followed. With a puff, half of the gun tip appeared behind the sand shield. Hong Fan had no expression on his face, and his face was a little stiff. Most of the martial arts geniuses have similar temperaments. Tang Xingqing is not the only one who thinks he is invincible in the same realm. Although Hong Fan did not say it, he never thought that there was anyone stronger than himself below Jiaozhao Xianshan. But at this moment, when he saw this shot, his thoughts were shaken. If I now meet Gu Yixin 5 years ago, what are my chances of winning in a life and death battle? Hong Fan asked himself. There are many variables in fighting. But if you imagine a scene where you don't know each other and fight for the first time, he thinks that the most likely person to die is himself. Duan Xiaonan watched with his arms folded, and he could see what Hong Fan was thinking at a glance. For the two of you, in a one-on-one with the same cultivation, I think it's 70% to 30%. Brother Gu takes 70%, he stroked his beard and said carefully. But this doesn't mean that you, Brother Hong, are weaker. You can fight both close and long distance, your fighting style is varied, and you have many group attack methods. Most importantly, you can fly. From this perspective, if I put you two into the insect swarm in the west of Shangzhou or the heavy mountains in the east of Zhejiao, I think your chances of survival are much higher than that of my brother Gu. Duan Xiaonan's words were quite pertinent, and the two nodded. As they grow older, the improvement of warriors is not only in their cultivation. Therefore, the comparison of the combat power of 2 generations of Xianjiao, who are 5 years apart, from a distance does not mean much. As a master, Duan Xiaonan naturally understands this. Gu Yixin practiced martial arts but his mind was not on martial arts, and the topic was dropped as soon as it was over. Only Hong Fan often couldn't help staring at the spearhead that was constantly polished and renewed this afternoon. After half of the Shen time, the hot winged hell was almost polished and finalized. The three were resting when they saw 2 men coming in at the door of the martial arts arena. They were not equipped with armor and wore standard black leather boots. They were obviously officers of the Beisheng army. The 2 came to find Duan Xiaonan. After walking a few dozen meters away, they carefully straightened their clothes and then came over to salute with a little embarrassment. Duan Xiaonan waved his hand to indicate that they didn't need to salute, and took the initiative to report the names of the 2. Feng Qing, deputy commander of the Lianshan camp of the Central Army, and Pu Jian, the general of the Left Army. The 2 nodded in response. Hong Fan knew that this meeting was pre-arranged. Have you all practiced the Iron Hand skill to the peak? Duan Xiaonan asked directly. Yes, I will break through before the 23rd, and Pu Jian will break through before the 5th, Feng Qing answered first. Please preach, Mr. Duan, the 2 said in unison, and actually knelt on their knees. There is no need to kneel. I have never valued etiquette. Duan Xiaonan shook his head and motioned them to stand up. You guys fight first. Let me see how good you are. After hearing this, the 2 officers of the Beisheng army didn't waste any more words, stood up and took up their positions, and practiced with bare hands. They practiced the same martial arts, and the techniques they used were also similar. mostly using the base of the palm and knuckles to strike. For a moment, the air was filled with a muffled sound of muscles and bones colliding. After 5 rounds, Hong Fan had roughly seen the quality of this iron hand kung fu. The moves were simple and lacked variety, and the pursuit was to exert force quickly and fiercely. Secondly, the breathing method was worked hard on, so the endurance of the practitioners must be good. At about this time, Duan Xiaonan stopped the competition. You two have a solid foundation and have practiced well. In this case, listen carefully to my lecture. He asked the two to sit down on the ground, and when he saw Hong Fan was about to avoid it, he stopped him again. In the next half an hour, Duan Xiaonan explained the part of the iron hand kung fu in detail twice. The skills are not profound, but even Hong Fan has gained something in terms of exerting force in breathing. As for the two officers, although they only understood a small part of the 10 points, they were already excited and overjoyed. Afterwards, even though Duan Xiaonan looked unhappy, they still kowtowed 3 times respectfully before leaving. It was already Yoshi, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The group left a martial arts arena and walked along Yishan Lake back to Longqiu town. The sky was getting darker. Yishan Lake was filled with late returning clouds. Hong Fan looked around and saw that the Tingshan mountain in the east was as dark as ink, and the wild grass in the west was as misty as smoke. "Brother Duan, are those 2 military marquises your disciples?" he asked, but he didn't think it was likely, but he just wanted to start a conversation. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 345 Iron Hand. Of course not, otherwise the entire Beishing army would be my disciples. Duan Xiaonan smiled back. Hong Fan heard the subtext and couldn't help but look sideways. That's right, the military martial arts used by the Beishing army is the iron hand kung fu just now. Duan Xiaonan nodded. I heard before that Brother Duan practiced the iron palm kung fu, right? Hong Fan asked in confusion. Before leaving Zijing, he had collected some information about Duan Xiaonan, and there was no martial arts called iron hand kung fu among them. You remember it well, because iron hand kung fu is my new creation after I came to Huaiyang State, Duan Xiaonan replied. When he said this, he deliberately turned his head back, and sure enough, he saw Hong Fan staring and laughing with joy. Creating a martial art from scratch is extremely difficult, requiring both mechanical talent and spiritual talent. In Jinhei City, Hong Fan personally witnessed 2 heroes joining in. One suffered countless years in pain, and the other was forced into a desperate situation. Because of this, he decisively gave up on innovating on the basis of Yanliu Guang and turned to look for ways to become a martial arts master. It's a long story. Duan Xiaonan waited until he had finished laughing, glanced at the fishing boats in Yishan Lake that seemed to be moving, and put his hands behind his back. In Dahua Jiazhao, there are probably not many martial artists who don't know the name of the founder of the Iron Palm. To be modest, my martial arts talent is not the pinnacle, but at least 1 in 10,000. He glanced at the 2 people beside him, and his words were meaningful. There's a Wuiyu mountain in Yiaocheng, Hejian State. There's a village called Wenxi Village at the foot of the mountain next to a stream. I was born and raised in Wenxi Village. When I was 9, I had the physique of a young boy. When I was 10, I defeated the whole village. When I was 11, my father allowed me to eat at the table. My brother was 2 years older than me, and at that time he had to squat outside the house with a bowl in his hand. When I was 12, I was famous in 3 or 4 nearby villages, and I was chosen to cultivate the public fields for the Iron Master on the mountain. Duan Xiaonan's face, which was crowded with beard and hair, was full of nostalgia. I was as strong as an ox at that time. With a simple mind, I saw little and thought little. Every day, I got up early and worked late without getting tired, and worked very well. When I was 20, I could manage 50 acres of land by myself with these 2 arms and 2 legs. 50 acres of land per person. Hong Fan had no concept. But Gu Yixin exclaimed in surprise. Duan Xiaonan heard this, and the pride on his face was even greater than before. So I was appreciated by the elders of the sect and became a Char's disciple, and was taught some basic skills. Alice, he sighed. Hong Fan thought Duan Xiaonan was feeling sad, but he saw him wave his hand violently. Then, I flew high like a big bird, and I couldn't stop. Duan Xiaonan scratched his beard and pointed to the left mountain. Start at the age of 20, master it in 1 year, be completely absorbed in 3 years, and be innate in 5 years. From the first combination of innate to the 6th combination, I was only 33 years old, now I am 58, and the last level of Yuanzi is left. His hand pointed from the foot of the mountain to the top of the mountain. I have never been on the Xianjiao list because I learned martial arts too late, but it doesn't matter. Duan Xiaonan suddenly turned his head and pointed his thumb. Brother Hong, you may not know that the upper limit of the iron palm is only the 2nd combination of innate. I figured it out myself and pushed it to the 4th level of Yuanzi. Hong Fan gasped when he heard this. Only now did he know why this rough and sturdy man could be personally seen by the martial saint of Langai Estate and praised for his potential to be on the earth ranking. Of course, these are all things of the past. Duan Xiaonan stopped talking and continued to walk along the lake shore. The iron palm technique is not a very advanced technique. What is worth mentioning is that the palm power is powerful and the pair of flesh palms are as hard as gold and iron. When I first practiced it, I felt that there were many places that were not good enough. It focused too much on the outside and neglected the inside. Based on it, I made drastic changes, and now there is the Iron Palm Classic that directly leads to the 4 gates of Yuanzi. When I was 51 years old, there was a big commotion on Wu'ai Mountain. Many people in the sect clamored to remove the statue of the founder and replace it with my statue. It's really fucking sick. I really couldn't stand their thoughts. One night when I saw the moon was bright, I just ran away. After that, I stayed in the border of Zhejiao for 3 years. Less than a month after returning to Hejian, I came to Huaiyang State again. The fishing boats in the distance docked. Duan Xiaonan was still not satisfied, as if he had a lot more to say. The 2 people behind him were listening. Seeing this, the person in front continued to talk. That was nearly 4 years ago, when the Beishing army was not yet established. Old Chu and Yuntao only had 4,000 troops. Although the army was organized, it lacked a battle formation martial art. You know, the Zhejiao army teaches the Moi Palm, and above that there is the Wuji Shenwen Dian that connects with it. Our Hejian army officers practice the falling eagle pupil technique and are good at witnessing and archery. The Huaiyang Shinfeng army practices the upper and lower parts of the Xiaoyao Yin, and can reach the Xianshan Sai, which is amazing. If the Beishing army wants to become bigger and stronger, it must have its own martial art. Hong Fan was a little puzzled. Aren't Lord Beishing and General Su both Xianshan masters? He asked. Duan Xiaonan shook his head. Yun Tao has indeed practiced both parts of the Xiaoyao Yin to perfection, but practicing the Xiaoyao Yin requires the use of the Xiaoyao San. Otherwise the progress will be extremely slow. This formula is unique to the Feng family. As the head of a sect, Lao Chu's Yanling Chun Yanggong is the top level among the 3-grade martial arts, and can be practiced to the peak of the innate, but he can't take out the skills. Hong Fan didn't ask much, nor did he think much. Duan Xiaonan took the initiative to explain. Making the skills public is not just a matter of personal selfishness. First of all, the skills are the monopoly resources of the sect, which include not only the concepts and the route of practice, but also the moves and weaknesses. For a martial artist, making the skills public is no different from being naked. Secondly, Lao Chu has 3 disciples in the realm of heaven and man, 2 of whom are local tyrants, and there are 8 in the realm of unity. These people are all in the Beishing army. Even if you are the head of the sect, you have to consider the opinions of your disciples. Duan Xiaonan smiled calmly. I saw that they had many concerns, so I volunteered to simplify and modify the Iron Palm Classic and create a new Iron Hand Kung Fu as the military martial arts of the 100 Victory Army. I was so excited about this that I didn't sleep for half a month. Unlike the Iron Palm Classic, the Iron Hand Kung Fu does not require high talent. It is easy to understand and easy to use. Compared with the original version of the Iron Palm Kung Fu, I especially deleted the need for medicinal baths and some expensive horizontal training methods. In short, I don't ask for outstanding combat power, but I ask for fewer obstacles. To be fair, it is not easy to break through the heaven and man communication by practicing the Iron Hand Kung Fu, and it is even more difficult to enter the innate state. But as you just saw, this is already a usable martial arts method. Duan Xiaonan stopped by the Yishan Lake. So I plan to make the Iron Hand Kung Fu public to everyone inside and outside the 100 Victory Army. He took a deep breath. I thought very simply at that time. I worked in the fields from the age of 10 to 20, and I never found it boring, until the day I broke through the Yuanzi realm 15 years later. I flew in the air, chasing the fireball in the west for 300 miles, and fell into the mountain stream exhausted. Duan Xiaonan gathered the sun with his hands. You didn't see that the waves splash up to more than 10 feet high, he laughed. At that time, I realized that there were too many interesting things in the world than farming. Another burst of wild geese came with the wind. The sunset sank, igniting the waves of Yishan Lake. Martial arts is a good thing, Duan Xiaonan frowned for a rare time. But there are many people who work in the fields, but few who practice martial arts. I practiced at that time, and I didn't understand why. Later, when I saw the shitty world of Huaiyang State, I had only one idea. I want to give martial arts to everyone. His hair and beard were all spread out, and his 10 fingers were clenched into fists. Like a lion locked in an iron cage. P.S. I went out to eat with the operations officer in the evening, and after coming back, I finally wrote a chapter. I'm going to take a bath and try to fall asleep early. Good night, brothers. Chapter 346, The World is Like Iron. The vast mountains and wilderness swallowed up the human voices in an instant. Hong Fan's mouth was dry and he swallowed his saliva. He watched the wind blowing over the lake, blowing up the red silk around Duan Xiaonan's waist. Then it was pulled back and tied by the rough big hand. So, the words and people soon cooled down in the evening breeze. Many people disagree with me on the matter of making the Iron Hand Kung Fu public. Duan Xiaonan's voice became quiet. Yun Tao is a veteran of the battlefield, and he commands the troops with strictness, not kindness. He said that the army must have a strict hierarchy, otherwise there will be no discipline, and martial arts as a reward is one of the most important distinctions. If everyone can easily get the skills, many people will be unwilling to join the army again, and it will be more difficult to control the soldiers. This is not good for the 100 Victory Army. Duan Xiaonan paused. Even today, he still can't completely refute this statement. As for Lao Chu, he probably has some other ideas, Duan Xiaonan said with a sneer. I expected this to encounter resistance, because that's how it is in Jiazhou, whether it's the inheritance system that was once completely dominated by aristocratic families and sects, or the monopoly system that is being gradually established by the Martial Arts Academy. The martial arts are the most core resources, and the most important thing is to have a clean origin. Duan Xiaonan glanced at Hong Fan and Gu Yixin. The former understood, but the latter didn't quite understand. So he explained further. In this world, the origin of martial arts is clearer than a person's lineage. The so-called family background in the mouths of aristocratic families is based on official titles and blood relations, and family status represents the level of martial arts that can be practiced. Those who possess 10 classics are first-class aristocratic families. Those who inherit martial arts classics are second-class aristocratic families, and those who are third and fourth class are powerful landlords. If a martial arts practitioner with an unknown origin becomes known before it becomes popular, someone will come to rectify the origin. Hong Fan heard a lot of blood in the word rectify. The reason why this Hangwu Academy is disliked by so many aristocratic families is that it rebels against the system to a certain extent. Duan Xiaonan looked at Gu Yixin and said, Brother Gu has experience with this. The latter nodded. I have never had many friends. After picking up the Buzzy Vajra Classic, I studied it alone, Gu Yixin said. Until I reached the Guanchong realm and subdued a Maddox with my bare hands in front of others. The local Hangwu Academy came to me soon after. I thought that the things were picked up, and I knew them by heart anyway. Seeing that they were officials, I handed over the martial arts classics without hesitation. In this way, I was protected and funded by this Hangwu Academy and was regarded as the legitimate successor of the martial arts classics. From Gu Yixin's words, Hong Fan did not hear any regret or unwillingness. Perhaps he was naturally different from others and never felt that the Buzzy Vajra Classic belonged to him alone. Brother Gu is still lucky, Duan Xiaonan smiled. After all, the Buzzy Vajra Sutra has been lost for a long time, and no one can come out and say anything about it. Change to a martial art that has been named after a noble family. Suppose someone in Heijin has mastered the Kaiansi Nian, and within a month, the masters of the Duanli Tang family will definitely arrive. The result cannot be good. Hong Fan heard this and immediately thought of Li Hemming. At the age of 27, he had exhausted all the family martial arts, and he was still determined to innovate. By the time he was beaten and bleeding, he would probably be in his 30s. By that time, he was already the head of the Li family, with a wife and children, and was famous in Liangzhou. Being placed so high, it was impossible for him to give up everything and become a Tiki in this Hangwu Academy, and spend 10 years to exchange for a method. Now thinking about it, Li Heming may have told himself day after day not to worry, there must be a chance. Unfortunately, the world is like iron, and it really didn't give him any chance. In short, it's still the old saying I told you, in this world, fists are the biggest, and principles are the second, Duan Xiaonan concluded. If you have the ability to become a Yuanxi celestial being, then you have a bargaining chip and can negotiate. The same goes for the Tiki. He looked at Hong Fan. As far as I know, if you learned martial arts from the Zhangwu Academy, without special permission, you can only practice it yourself and cannot pass it on. But if you become a celestial being, you can spread it around and pass it on again and again. It's just a matter of running errands for the Zhangwu Academy a few more times and returning a few favors. Hong Fan nodded. Let's not talk about these irrelevant things. Duan Xiaonan took back the topic. Anyway, the Zhangwu Academy has done a lot of solid work. Most places in Jiazhou, including the border of Jiazhou, are doing okay, but Huaiyang is different, so I was very persistent at that time. In the end, Lao Chu and Yun Tao also took a step back and allowed the Iron Hand Kung Fu to disclose the methods of the inner vision realm and the penetration realm. As for the completeness and above, I still need to get permission from the Beisheng army before I can teach it myself. It's hard to describe to you how excited I was at that time. Duan Xiaonan put his hands on his hips and couldn't help laughing. I personally went to the top of the highest mountain within 100 miles to cut a 2-meter square stone, carried it step by step to the east gate of Yongnian City, and carved the skills with my fingers. He gestured with both hands in the air so that people could know the size of the rock. For 3 whole months, the east gate of Yongnian City was squeezed so hard that it was hard to move. Duan Xiaonan kicked a stone into the center of the lake, and then stared at the spreading ripples. My 2 brothers. I was born in a poor family and started practicing martial arts late, but once I came into contact with martial arts, I was able to do it smoothly and unstoppably, so I have always had an idea in my mind. I think many ordinary people are not incapable, but they are meat eaters and do not give opportunities to the world. He spoke softer and softer, and finally fell silent. What happened later? Hong Fan couldn't suppress his curiosity and asked hurriedly. He understood that the warrior who came from a farming family in front of him was actually doing a large-scale social experiment. Of course it was very good at the beginning. Duan Xiaonan was in a trance for a while before continuing to speak. At that time, everyone in Anmin County praised it. As long as you go to the land of the 100 Victory Army, you can practice martial arts. It is very attractive. Yun Tao recruited a lot of people at once. Relying on morale, he took 2 big cities in a short time and expanded his territory rapidly. As a result, it was too noisy. The royal court sent people 3 times for this matter. The last time was Feng Yubei, who came in person and chased me for hundreds of miles, he said excitedly, untying and tying the red silk around his waist. That was more than 3 years ago. At that time, every time I arrived at a place, I personally picked the best stones, cut and polished them, engraved the magic on them, and moved them to the most conspicuous place in the city. In the first 6 months alone, at least tens of thousands of people learned the basics of the Iron Hand Kung Fu. That's because most people are illiterate. To date, it is estimated that at least hundreds of thousands of people have heard of my martial arts. Damn, I really deserve the title of Grandmaster. Duan Xiaonan laughed again. Guess what happened later? This time it was a bitter smile. Until now, there are less than 200 people who have reached the level of Guantuan with the Iron Hand skill, and only 5 people have reached the level of Quanrun. Most of these 200 people are from the military. They are free from work, have good food, and can find people to teach and learn from. Excluding them, there are only more than 30 people among the people who have achieved Guantong on their own, which is about 1 person out of 5,000. This is just one thing. In more than 3 years, every piece of the rock I set up to pass on the law has been smashed by others. They were all made with the Iron Hand skill. At this point, Duan Xiaonan had to stop and take a breath. On the side, Gu Yixin opened his mouth slightly, still trying to understand the logic of the latter incident. Hong Fan was doing mental calculations. Just looking at the numbers, it is already very good to have 200 people who have achieved success in martial arts in 3 or 4 years. After all, the time is still short, and many people started too late. But taking the Hong family as an example, there are about 500 people in the clan, including the family sons like Zhang Yao and the descendants of the family soldiers like Shen Hong. The entire population plate for selection will not exceed 1,500. As for martial artists who have reached the level of penetration and above, even if we only count 2 years ago, there are about 100 of them. The difference between 15 to 1 and 5,000 to 1 is obvious. Moreover, the Iron Hand skill is meant to be easy to learn. The reason is clear at a glance. Hong Fan is considered to have good talent in the Hong Clan school. After 5 years of martial arts training, if he did not have the fully loaded 2 Aguang pills and Zissa pills, the Dragon Soul Tree and the Life Star, and relied purely on personal efforts and the benefits of the clan school, he would have been able to penetrate 4 main meridians at most, and would not be outstanding even if he was placed in the Red Cloth Cavalry. But this is already based on conditions that many other people do not deserve. He participated in the clan's private school to learn to read and punctuate since he was a child. With Hong Li's diligent and responsible teaching, he did not have to worry about making mistakes. He was supported by others before he became an adult and did not need to make a living. The clan school provided a free pill benefit. After counting them, Hong Fan had a new understanding of the difficulty of practicing martial arts. Duan Xiaonan finally recovered inside. I just know now that practicing martial arts is such a difficult thing. There was still a trace of confusion on his face. Only then did I know that for a 30-year-old illiterate farmer, it was harder to remember and understand the key points of inner vision to the level of penetration, which only had a few thousand words, than for me to manage 50 acres of land by myself. Only then did I know that aristocratic families and sects are a combination of a series of resource conditions with martial arts inheritance as the core. Only then did I know that the superiority of noble sons over ordinary people is not just martial arts classics. I think many people have understood this principle a long time ago, but I gave up after trying. The sunset was setting, like a still fire. Duan Xiaonan lowered his eyes and looked at the reflections of the 3 people in the lake. Brother Gu learned to read and write by just sitting in on the sporadic classes in the private school while working as a long-term laborer. Later, he picked up the obscure Buzzy Vajra Sutra and became a self-taught person without a teacher or medicine. Brother Hong has been blessed with a star and has been constantly innovating. He is famous for his original killing methods, which are numerous and powerful. As if he was taught by the ancestor of the dragon, and me. I started practicing martial arts too late and too fast, so after I mastered it, I naturally felt that since there's only one Duan Xiaonan in the small Wenxi village, there should be countless Duan Xiaonans in the world, and it is not worth it for them to live in the fields. Guess what? Duan Xiaonan asked himself and answered. I didn't expect that there is only one Duan Xiaonan in the world. He laughed. He was proud and lonely. The laughter lasted for a long time. The lake water licked the shore from time to time. Duan Xiaonan stood motionless, his back embedded in the golden sunset. Who would have thought that the mediocrity of ordinary people is not due to anything else? It's really just mediocrity. After a long time, he turned around and stretched out his hand to press Hong Fan's shoulder heavily. Brother Hong, the world is like this. Don't blame anyone. Don't blame me. Don't blame you either. If you want to blame someone, blame Zulong for sending down the martial arts. Blame God for being unfair and favoring people. Hong Fan had mixed feelings at this point. He immediately understood why Duan Xiaonan came to him today and told him these past events. Just like he immediately understood why Duan Xiaonan went to get wine and meat, smashed the wine jar, and scolded Feng Jiang when he saw him hypothermia in the storm under the top of Feng Jiang that day. Even if he was a second-generation human, he rarely felt this kind of warmth from the inside out. I'm fine, Hong Fan whispered, looking up at the bearded man. The setting sun was blazing at this time, shining brilliantly and brightly on the top of Zulin Mountain, making him unable to see the other person's eyes. But he clearly felt that he saw it. Brother Duan, I'm fine now, Hong Fan called him brother with unprecedented sincerity. P.S. With more than 3,400 words, how can it not be counted as a 2-in-1 chapter? Chapter 347, Leaving the Seclusion. The 3rd day of September in the 29th year of Zheng. Flowing clouds are moving in the sky. Below the clouds is the Guancheng. 2 mountains are like palms, gathering the north wind. Hong Fan held a parapet with his hands and stood on the city wall against the wind. The autumn harvest was completely over more than half a month ago. The peaceful situation in the central part of the entire Huaiyang state has also changed because of this. In the south, 3 large banners led the way, and the vanguard soldiers followed the flags and passed through the Guancheng. Looking back, take a long look. The team snaked in intermittently, all the way to the military camp behind Longqiu town. In comparison, the Yishan Lake, which was shining against the sky, seemed to be only the size of a puddle. This time, The Beishing army mobilized 30,000 combat soldiers, as well as a larger number of auxiliary soldiers and civilians. It can almost be said that they came out in full force. Hong Fan retracted his gaze and looked at the soldiers marching towards the city gate below, wearing sackcloth leggings and leaning on wooden sticks. The team followed a cart pulled by oxen and horses. The vehicles were neatly loaded with spears, swords and other weapons, complete sets of armor, bows, arrows, medicine boxes, tents, and corresponding poles, beams, wooden stakes, and hammers. With Hong Fan's eyesight, he could even see the number of rows of armor leaves written on the front of the armor. On both sides of the pass, next to the foothills, many larger vehicles were being loaded, and the cargo was large logs that had been preliminarily processed. This was used to build siege equipment. Hong Fan had seen the situation north of Duanli, and all the available trees had long been cleared by the defenders in the city. It took a full quarter of an hour for only 2,000-man teams to pass through the pass. The complexity of the army's march was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. This reminded Hong Fan of Tang Xingqing's matter. Even though she had been trapped in Yingshan courtyard, she still sensed that the Beishing army would take action through the words of passers-by and the sudden increase in the sound of wheels on the street. For 2 days in a row, Tang Xingqing took the initiative to clean up, and even deliberately saved a few persimmons from her meals, and pretended to be well-behaved in order to please Hong Fan. The latter naturally said nothing. But the more this happened, the more she was sure that a war would break out, so she tried to climb over the wall and break the door several times to cause trouble. Of course, there was no result in the end. In fact, as far as Hong Fan knew, the Tang family had always sent people to discuss the redemption of people, and the conditions were very high. But the release can only be after the Battle of Duanli City. Letting Tianxing stand on the city wall is asking for trouble for the 100 Victory Army. Young Master Hong, a call came from the side. Hong Fan's thoughts were interrupted. The person who spoke was a messenger. The people in the White Tiger Hall are all here. General Su invites you to go over, he said respectfully. General Su refers to Su Yuntao. Hong Fan nodded and thanked him, and went back to the tower. It was noon, the sun was bright, but the windows in the White Tiger Hall were not open, and braziers were used to illuminate the left and right. More than 10 people were in 2 rows. Duan Xianan stood at the innermost side with his hands behind his back, staring at an extremely exquisite huge sand table. It was Hong Fan's creation. The main terrain on the sand table is 2 mountains, a lake, a pass, and the hills outside the pass. 3 small flags marked the 3 core locations of Longqiu Town, Tingshan Pass, and Duanli City. Hong Fan stepped over the threshold and heard Jiu Yuanka giving a lecture. I have said again and again that Duanli City must be taken. First of all, this city is facing Tingshan Pass across the air. It is the transportation hub of Huaiyang State and the only way to advance to Yunlin City. Secondly, Yao River is to the east of Duanli City. Those who occupy the city naturally radiate waterways. In the future, if we advance to the southeast, we can rely on Yao River to maintain the supply line and save a lot of logistics. Thirdly, Duanli City is a fertile land. The Tang family has been operating it for generations. There are many granaries, and there are iron mines in the south of the city. Once this city is taken, the shortage of military rations, gold and silver, and supplies will be solved. Jiu Yuanka's tone was very firm. But to Hong Fan, it sounded a bit helpless. After all, it was an old saying that had been said several times. Now the army was moving like a dragon, but Jiu Yuanka still wanted to say it. He naturally had a reason to repeat it. Not long after the voice stopped, a man with a mustache sitting on the left interrupted. Master, we all know the importance of Duanli City. Hong Fan recognized this man, Pan Rui, who was Jiu Yuanka's direct disciple and a local tyrant in Yongnian City. But I have coordinated several times, and the brothers below are still not on the same page. He looked bitter. Now the enemy and I have our own strengths. We hold the dangerous pass of Tingshan, and Wang Ting occupies the high city of Duanli. Whoever moves first will suffer. Jiu Yuanka's face sank slightly. Pan Rui immediately stopped talking. However, there was another voice on the right. Lord Beishin, General Su, or, can we wait a little longer? A square-faced man in armor tried to speak. Hong Fan had seen him twice. His name was Yan, and he was also a general in the army. We are in a good situation. Can we take a rest and recuperate until next year? Both of them spoke in a very humble tone. But Hong Fan knew that Jiu Yuanka's words were equivalent to saying nothing. As an outsider to a certain extent, he saw the essence of the problem very clearly. The reason for attacking Duanli City is simple. The dispute now is only because the focus of the issue has shifted from military to politics. In the 2 months in Longqiu town, Hong Fan learned a lot about the locals' ideas. Whether it is for food or for martial arts, the motivation of most people in the Beijing army to join is just to survive. It was okay when the outward expansion was unstoppable before. Once it was blocked, many ideas emerged uncontrollably. This year's harvest is good, and the royal court can no longer control its own land. Why can't we hold on to the 2 mountains and live a stable life first? As for leaving Tingshan Pass again, people in other places are dead or alive, and they are no longer in front of them anyway. What does it have to do with them? Ye Hong was still beating around in circles. Hong Fan sighed silently. Duan Xiaonan couldn't listen anymore. It's early September now. By the beginning of next spring, there will be at least 20,000 to 30,000 lives lost on Fengyinding, not counting the wind disaster. He turned around suddenly and interrupted. If you want to talk about the near future, taking down Duanli City will cut off the Anmin County, which is equivalent to removing the sword hanging over the heads of several righteous armies in the west. If you want to talk about the long term, if you want to end the chaos in Huaiyang State, Fengjiang must die. A year and a half ago, Yunlin City was filled with a foul smell for half a month. This is something I have confirmed personally. At that time, everyone in the city said that Fengjiang had reached the 5 decline of heaven and man, and the number 1 on the earth ranking would have to be replaced. In the end, he did not die, but there is no doubt that he did not break through the heavenly gate. Now, unless he breaks through the gate himself, there is only one way for us to kill him, besiege or even break through Yunlin City. The more people the impermanence realm on Fengyinding eats, the more it means it will be difficult to sustain. As long as the blood sacrifice is stopped, it will be the end of Fengjiang. Duan Xiaonan said word by word, his eyes sweeping over the generals in the hall one by one. As long as the Beijing army is still a righteous army, Duanli City must be attacked, he said. No one dared to speak in the hall. Duan Xiaonan was not the founder of the Beijing army, nor did he get involved in any routine affairs. Based on the consciousness of a latecomer, although he often attended high-level meetings, he usually only agreed or suggested, not made decisions. This was the first time he expressed it so decisively. P.S. I finally wrote a difficult chapter. I will go to see a Chinese doctor tomorrow. Good night. Chapter 348, City Walk. The autumn wind was blowing outside the hall. But it was like winter inside the hall. No one could catch Duan Xiaonan's gaze. Not only because he was a half-mentor to most of the people in the Beijing army, but also because without his support, it would be a delusion to live in peace in a corner. Everyone knows that Tingshan Pass alone cannot stop Wang Tingyuanzi. Duan Xiaonan retreated to one side. Chu Yuanka stood up with his hands behind his back, looking out the door silently. So Su Yanteo stood up and took the initiative to speak. Duanli City has stopped us twice, in late summer last year and early spring this year. The first time was when we had just captured Tingshan Pass. We underestimated the enemy and advanced rashly. In fact, we were not strong enough. The second time, we had an advantage in combat power, but we were short of military rations and were forced to give up, he said sincerely. But this time is different. This time, our army has 3 victories. The first victory is that this year's grain harvest is abundant, and we are full of confidence. The second victory is the establishment of the vanguard camp. The 300 elite soldiers are equipped with heavy iron armor sent from the north, and they are unmatched in the battle. The third victory is that Lord Beisheng invited Long Sushi from Huzhou to lead the craftsman camp. He has been fighting against giant spirits in the northern border for decades and is an expert in the construction of city defenses. Su Yanteo's words heated up the atmosphere a lot. Seeing this, he breathed a sigh of relief calmly and added. In addition, there is a trump card. What trump card? The 10 high-ranking generals of the Beisheng army were very curious. Su Yanteo first glanced at Hong Fan, and then signaled the 2 generals at the outermost to close the door. The room was a little dark. He walked to the side and pulled down the oilcloth, revealing 5 large boxes, the size of a table, painted white on the outside and painted with thunder patterns. White Thunder God, Hong Fan recognized it at a glance. Yes, White Thunder God plus the world of sand? Su Yanteo nodded heavily. As long as it is properly arranged, there is no wall that cannot be taken. 3 days later, September 6th. Duanli City has been locked since yesterday, and there are people on duty on the watchtower for 12 hours. Under their gaze, the military camp outside the city was laid out, surrounded on 3 sides. Tents, wooden fences, camp gates, arrow towers, chevaux de frise, trenches. Everything seemed to grow out of the ground. In the early morning, the noisy smoke and dust rose, and when the voices dissipated at dusk, the war beasts with majestic bodies were revealed. At the right time of the night, the earth was calmed by the night. The craftsman camp of the Beisheng army began to build siege equipment overnight. Facing the bleak autumn wind, Hong Fan walked out of the main camp in the north alone and looked south. The majesty of Duanli City can be seen at a glance. The city is 5 feet high, the wall foundation is built with stone blocks, the wall is compacted with clay, and the outer wall is covered with blue bricks. The gaps between bricks and stones were filled with tune oil, glutinous rice juice and lime paste. Ordinary people could hardly penetrate half an inch at a time with an iron spike. This was not the kind of hollow castle that could be destroyed by a catapult. On the top of the city, enemy towers were lined up like peaks. Behind the battlements, there were shadows of people, and rows of braziers were burning, which slightly stained the night. Within 100 meters below the city, the fortifications were clearly layered. The innermost side was a 6-foot-high sheep-horse wall with shooting holes. Close to the sheep-horse wall was a 2-zang wide and 2-meter-deep moat. The combination of the two could greatly slow down the speed of filing the river and building a bridge. Further out, a trench for trapping horses was arranged horizontally, with deer antlers and chevaux de frise scattered in front and behind. In between, 4 horned caltrops were scattered, reflecting the light of sparks, and it was cold and cold. Hong Fan looked down all the way, and his mood was naturally solemn, as if he had returned to the Snake Man battlefield in Jinhe. It was even heavier than then. There were a total of 400,000 residents inside and outside Duanli City. Now the city is locked during wartime, and the surrounding population has fled. There are still more than 200,000 people in the city, a total of 8,000 elite Xianfeng army. If it were in Hong Fan's previous life, more than 30,000 soldiers would never be able to besiege such a large city with a large population and abundant young and strong people. But Dahua is different. Because of the existence of martial arts, ordinary people cannot be converted into combat power even if they have weapons. Only warriors who have undergone long-term military training and are proficient in bows and swords have basic battlefield value. Not to mention the monsters in the Guantuang realm who are strong enough to fight against bears and tigers, and can climb the city barehanded while wearing super heavy armor. Even in the inner vision realm, which is not worthy of being called a warrior, there are many people who can squat hundreds of kilograms, and their physical fitness is comparable to that of top athletes in the previous life. After wearing armor and holding sharp weapons, they are each equivalent to Lu Bu and Xiangyu, and it is easy to fight against mortals 1 against 10 this time. The Beisheng army dispatched 15,000 such inner vision soldiers, which is more than 30% of the total number under its rule. Just as Hong Fan was watching the enemy under the moon and his mind was in a mess, footsteps came from behind. He looked back and saw that it was Chu Yuanke who came with Duan Xianan. Brother Hong is a man who does great things. He is still here to enjoy the moon when the war is about to start, Duan Xianan said with a smile. Brother Duan really thinks highly of me. I was hesitant before the battle, so I hide out. Hong Fan smiled bitterly and nodded to Chu Yuanke as a greeting. It's inevitable. People without reverence can't reach high places, the latter said. I saw Duanli Gao Chang again this morning, and I was short of breath. But on the other hand, those guys on the city must be even more terrified when they arranged such a formation. Hong Fan nodded when he heard it, and looked at the shadows on the top of the city again. Sure enough, he felt differently. At this time, he caught a glimpse of Duan Xianan untying the red silk around his waist and then tying it again, and carefully adjusting his sleeves. Brother Duan, what is this? Hong Fan asked. Of course, he is preparing to go to the top of the city. Duan Xianan stared into the long night and replied sharply. Sergeant, Hong Fan frowned. It's better to fight early than late. The sooner I fight Tang Laojian, the fewer variables there will be. Duan Xianan flexed his knuckles. When two armies fight, once there is a Yuanzi level combat force, we must be extra cautious. Unless there are magic weapons or special methods, even multiple innates will be useless in military affairs. He pointed to the camp gate behind him. No matter how solid the camp is and how strong the morale is, as long as Tang Laojian comes in the middle of the night and rains swords every quarter of an hour, these 30,000 people can only dodge. Of course, my deterrent power against Duanli City is the same. Hong Fan nodded silently. He remembered Qilin's spear that penetrated a city wall with a sonic boom cloud. If there is no basic balance at the level of king versus king and general versus general, Dahua's war has always been a situation of crushing, withering and rotten. Even the weaker side finds it difficult to even have the heart to resist. You guys watch first, I'll be back soon, Duan Xiaonan said to the two people and flew into the city. A few miles passed in a flash. Hong Fan used his eyesight to the limit, watching him swooping down and blasting out a palm force with a golden outline. The corner tower that was hit first exploded instantly. Bricks and stones shattered on all sides, raising smoke and dust, like silent and colorless fireworks. 2 seconds later, the sound of explosions came from afar, accompanied by the sound of bells. Then, there was a majestic shout that seemed empty because of the distance. Tang Laojin, did you feel okay with a palm strike last time? The voice swept across the military camp against the wind. Hong Fan immediately saw a backwash of rain rolling up from the bottom to the top behind the city. It was the iron scale sword formation reflecting the moonlight. Duan Xiaonan, if you don't come to find me tonight, I will go to find you. It was Tang Xiaoyao's voice. Chapter 349, Siege. Tang Xiaoyao and Duan Xiaonan have been rivals for several years. Therefore, he had a premonition before nightfall and came to the city to wait for this inevitable battle. The sword formation soared into the sky like a dragon, and then scattered like stars, encircling one person. Then it was blasted away by the golden palm force. There was a commotion in the military camp. Many soldiers came out of the tent, and once they saw the battle group in the distance, they stopped and kept silent. From a distance, even if Hong Fan closed his eyes, he could feel the spiritual energy of heaven and earth rising like the tide. It was like a small fish drifting in the vortex of two giant whales colliding. Neither Duan Xiaonan nor Tang Xiaoyao were cold-blooded killers. They knew very well that the fundamental purpose of this fight was to reduce the uncertainty of war and reduce possible casualties. Therefore, the battle group quickly rose and moved away from the city at a speed of hundreds of kilometers per hour. The camp was silent for 2/4 of an hour. Then, when Duan Xiaonan returned dragging a red silk under the moon, a relaxed cheer rose. Hong Fan and Chu Yuanka came to meet him outside the camp gate. They saw Duan Xiaonan's shirt was ragged and he had 2 flying sword-piercing wounds on his body. One was on the forearm and the other was on the side ribs. The wound was 1 inch wide, slightly red and swollen, and the bleeding had stopped. How is the injury? Hong Fan's jawline tightened slightly, and he asked with concern. Not light, Duan Xiaonan replied nonchalantly. He lost about 50% to 60% of his combat power. He needs to recover for a few days. Tang Laojin is even worse. I hit his shoulder with a palm, breaking more than 100 iron scales. It will take dozens of hours to repair the brand. He looked at Chu Yuanqi again. Old Chu, with your old brother and you, we can already hold our own against him now. If there are more mid-level innates, we may even have the chance of winning. This battle is a lose-lose situation, but Tang Laojin is not as old and strong as me, and his recovery from injuries is far slower than mine, Duan Xiaonan said with complacency. Chu Yuanqi's expression also eased a lot after hearing this. In his mind, the 500 or 600 iron scales were a more terrifying city defense than the high walls in the distance. Without this battle tonight, he would not dare to send his soldiers to Duanli City. The next day, September 7th. Outside Duanli City, the sun rose high. At 6 a.m., the Beisheng army began to cook. Smoke and steam rose, forming low clouds. Half an hour later, the whole army had dinner on time. After eating the hot food, the soldiers put on their armor and went out of the camp under the shouting of the lower-level officers. At noon, the sun shone brightly. The two armies faced each other hundreds of steps apart. A whip sounded. Su Yanteo rode out of the battle, stepping on the desolate smoke and dust, and moved forward 200 steps. The marching general of the Beisheng army notified the Tang family of Duanli and the soldiers of the Xianfeng army. Those who surrender will not be killed, those who abandon the city will not be pursued, and those who capture the city will not be slaughtered, he shouted with a breath. His voice went against the wind and hit the top of the city like thunder. Tang Shengwang responded with ridicule. You are just a traitor. You have suffered 2 defeats in front of me, and you dare to speak so arrogantly. He stepped onto the battlements and pointed his finger. There was a burst of laughter from the city. Su Yanteo did not refute with a cold face, but just challenged him. Mr. Tang, do you dare to come down to the city to fight? Why not? Tang Shengwang replied. Okay, it's a deal. Su Yantao rode back to the battle formation, as if he was going back to change weapons. Tang Shengwang took the double-headed star shuttle flying sword floating beside him and jumped down. Then, he stood in the middle and saw the opposite army split. It was not Su Yantao who came out, but a young gunman in gray. He was not good-looking and looked easy to deal with. Tang Shengwang's heart skipped a beat. After fighting in 2 sieges, how could he not recognize that it was Gu Yixin? Change people at the last minute, Su Yantao, you are really a rat, Tang Shengwang shouted angrily. But Gu Yixin did not stop. When the 2 sides were about 100 steps apart, Tang Shengwang finally couldn't stand it anymore and turned to flee back to the top of the city, leaving Gu Yixin alone standing in the loess. Tang Shengwang, I just said it was a fight, but I didn't say who it was. Su Yantao's words floated over. Tang Shengwang was about to retort, but he heard Gu Yixin's question. Senior Tang, don't you dare to fight me, calm and serious, you are not talking nonsense, Tang Shengwang thought. Of course he was not stupid enough to say it out loud. But no matter what, scaring the enemy's commander and making him flee in silence has greatly boosted the morale of the Beisheng army. Since the spear leader was under the city, the fight was naturally over. Tang Shengwang then arranged several specially selected soldiers to shout and scold at the top of the city. Su Yantao was well prepared, and at his command, several soldiers with loud voices and many words went out. The 2 sides exchanged sharp words for a while, which opened Hong Fan's ears. Although the verbal battle did not stop, the Beisheng army did not stop. Not long after, 8 shield carts were pushed out from the rear, with 4 wheels and hardwood shields covered with leather and a height of 1.5 feet in front. The shields were also smeared with wet mud. Pan Rui, let your men go up and peel off the outer layer of skin for me first, Su Yantao ordered. The war drums sounded. There were 2,000 people in the first batch, with a ratio of 1 combat soldier to 3 auxiliary soldiers. The former wore iron armor and carried a big axe, and the latter carried an empty bamboo basket. The shield carts marched forward in a line, approaching within 200 steps of the city. The auxiliary soldiers dispersed as ordered, carrying bamboo baskets to pick up caltrops. At this time, the distance was still far, and only a few snipers on the city tried to shoot arrows, occasionally nailing 1 or 2 people to the ground, making the drum sound mixed with faint screams. Then a military commander shouted and ordered the shieldmen to go forward to grab the wounded. As the array moved forward, the caltrops were quickly cleared. At 9 a.m., the shield carts advanced 200 steps below the city. The heavily armored soldiers carried axes and chopped horizontally and vertically, crushing the barricades and deer horns into pieces, clearing the way for the large siege equipment. At this time, they had entered the effective killing range of the bows and crossbows. Arrows continued to pile up from the top of the city and nailed into the iron armor. Once a strong man who had penetrated a state of unity released a bow, an especially shrill arrow whistle would be heard. In the main camp, on the temporary platform for selecting generals, Hong Fan enjoyed a seat due to his reputation. From here he could clearly see everything on the front line. A heavy armored soldier who was about to chop with an axe was nailed into the left chest by a 4-sided heavy arrow and fell down without a sound. The one on the left glanced at it, knowing that there was no hope, and lowered his head to continue doing his own thing. The one on the right was terrified, looked back at the main camp, and took out the pill with trembling hands and swallowed it. In just a few breaths, the man's flashing eyes became as deep as a pool of water, and he turned back to mechanically chop against the arrows. On the stage, Hong Fan stood up several times, but was persuaded by Chiu Yuanqi to stop. He felt that time was passing very slowly. Su Yantao was the busiest one, repeatedly sending people to confirm the progress of equipment construction and earthwork transportation. At noon, the whole army had lunch. The lunch of senior generals was the same as that of the soldiers, but 2 flatbreads. The difference was that Hong Fan and his men had an extra bowl of steaming mutton soup. At 1 p.m., most of the roadblocks were cleared. The cost was more than 500 casualties. In the afternoon, under the direct sunlight of the autumn sun, the Beisheng army began to deal with the horse-trapping trench. Baskets of soil were transported to the front line by civilians. The shield carts were like castles in front of the trench and were used as transfer points. The tower shields were mobile low walls, covering the auxiliary soldiers to fill the pit with soil. Although the rain of arrows was sparse, it never stopped. Those who were lucky went back and forth several times without any harm. Those who were unlucky were pierced by heavy arrows and fell into the trench with their earth bags, which was considered to have exceeded the task. At this time, Su Yunteo issued another military order. Finally, Hong Fan was able to go into battle accompanied by Gu Yixin. Chapter 350, Kill Time. After 2 sieges, the ground outside Duanli City was mostly barren. Hong Fan walked out of the battle line and headed for the city. Everyone he saw was in a fierce mood, holding shields, running, filling soil, shooting and other tense movements. There was a fishy smell in the wind. Occasionally, green clusters emerged from the barrenness. I don't know if it was irrigated by rain or sprinkled with last year's blood. After walking 300 steps, Hong Fan stepped over the corpses of the barricades and saw the leather shield cart that was pierced like a hedgehog, and the horse trap trench in front of him. It was only 2 meters wide and more than a meter deep, and the bottom of the pit was full of sharpened bamboo thorns. This was the fierce killing field of the auxiliary soldiers. Hong Fan heard a low roar as if he was forced into a desperate situation. Following the sound, he saw a shirtless man with a half-white beard carrying a bamboo basket full of soil rushing out from behind the shield cart. When he reached the edge of the trench, he knocked the basket to the ground and poured out all the soil, and then he was shot down by an arrow when he turned around and ran. There was a shield warrior who gritted his teeth to save him. Such things were happening continuously on the 100-meter line of 8 shield vehicles. Hong Fan let out a long breath and quickened his pace. From more than 10 meters away, he began to carry sand and accumulate kinetic energy. When he reached the edge of the trench, several tons of earth rolled forward like a stream of water, filling up more than a meter wide at a time, equal to the number of auxiliary soldiers going back and forth by hundreds. Hong Fan and Gu Yixin, dressed in cloth and with their backs straight, were already conspicuous on the battlefield. After the sand and dust landed, it attracted all the attention between the 2 corner towers. The whistling of arrows became stronger for a while. The sound of the wind approached, but Hong Fan did not raise his head, and his sharp spear tip swallowed and spit out like a snake's tongue, smashing the incoming arrows. The second layer of sand waves was pulled from behind. Change position. Then the third layer. In a few minutes, a 5-meter-wide trench was roughly filled. The killing intent came at this time. Just as the rain of arrows poured down on Hong Fan, a double-headed star shuttle flew close to the ground and inserted from the side. Hong Fan sensed the change of the innate spiritual energy and continued to concentrate on filing the soil. When the magnificent air burst and the clanging sound of metal and iron rose and fell, no attack could get within 3 feet of him. The attack and defense continued for several rounds. Tang Shengwang's cultivation was not as good as Gu Yixin's, and it was even more difficult to attack from a distance of dozens of meters. Seeing the trenches being easily filled up by the sand world, he could not suppress his anger. But he didn't dare to go down the city anyway. He had seen the spear leader get ruthless. He stabbed with 1 step, and moved forward and backward, but he didn't care how many arrows came in front of him or how many people stood behind his opponent. Send me more archers, Tang Shengwang was furious, and he only hated that the crossbow on the corner tower could not be adjusted to a negative shooting angle. At the same time, Su Yunteo saw the effect and sent reinforcements from the back, hundreds of sniper teams, each with 2 people holding tower shields and 3 people using strong crossbows. Bows and crossbows crossed each other on the top of the city, and there were casualties on both sides. By the time the setting sun was as red as blood and the troops were called off, there were already smooth roads several dozen meters wide outside the 3 sides of the city leading directly to the city. On the corner tower, Tang Shengwang watched the enemy army return to the camp, and Li Ziqi, the lieutenant general of the Xianfeng army beside him, also had a solemn expression. They had originally expected to delay the attackers for 2 or 3 days, but they only lasted for an afternoon. Nothing happened at night. On the second day, at dawn, there was still a thin mist from last night outside Duanli City. The defenders looked out from the top of the city, and wherever they saw, the wooden fortress and the tents seemed to be submerged in water. After cooking, the sun was high, and the fog died in the light. The whole army left the camp. Hong Fan stepped onto the steps to the general's platform, and saw several generals stand up and salute. Pan Rui, who led the army yesterday, came over to lead the way affectionately. Duan Xianan stayed in the camp to recuperate. Chu Yuanka sat alone in the main seat. As usual, the person in charge of military affairs was Su Yunteo. The most urgent task today is to build the moat of Duanli City, He pointed with his whip and announced the decision made after last night's discussion before the battle. Hong Fan sat aside and could clearly feel that the generals of the 100 Victory Army were both excited and confused. The war progressed so fast that both sides were caught off guard. As a result, the artisan battalion worked all night and only added 8 large shield carts to the front army. According to the pre-war plan, they would need 2 or 3 days to reach the moat. The increase in the fortifications of the Sand World exceeded everyone's expectations. But Su Yanteo knew the importance of sharpness to the attackers. Now that he had the advantage, there was no reason to stop and wait. Duanli is indeed a strong city, but the water system in the city is not abundant, so the moat is shallow and narrow, only 2 feet wide and 6 feet deep. He paced with his hands behind his back. There are only 2 ways to deal with the moat. The first is to build a floating bridge. This method is fast and efficient, and can suppress small city military camps, but it cannot pass large equipment. With the city defense and the number of masters in Duanli City, floating bridges are not suitable, so the military meeting yesterday has been decided, or use the second method, filling the river. When saying this, Su Yanteo even clenched his teeth. After the military order was issued, the war drums sounded. At 3/4 of the morning, in the western section far away from the north wall and the city gate, Yi Hong led the right army to press forward. Like all cities that suppress key points, Duanli City has more than one layer of earned city, and each city gate is hung with a 10,000 jin gate. Therefore, the Beisheng army did not think of attacking the city gate as the main attack. 16 shield carts with newly applied wet mud approached the moat. Archers rushed to suppress. And then a large number of shield soldiers covered the auxiliary soldiers and carried spoil forward. At first, Hong Fan did not understand Su Yanteo's solemnity, and thought that this was just a repetition of yesterday's work. But as the 2 armies engaged, he soon realized the problem. The earthwork transportation line was tens of meters longer, and although it was more exposed to the line of fire, the main problem was still under the city. The outer edge of the moat was only 3 or 4 feet away from the base of the city wall. This distance was enough for the horse-faced wall protruding from the wall to form a perfect crossfire, so that the effect of the large shield was greatly weakened. In addition, there was a cattle and horse wall across the city moat. The inner and outer gates of the city were opened and closed alternately, and hundreds of archers came out. With the help of the shooting holes on the cattle and horse wall, the soldiers filing the river not only had to beware of the upper part, but also had to face the direct firepower 6 meters away, and even the long spear stabbing in. Even if the line was deliberately loose, in just a quarter of an hour, Yi Hong's men had lost more than 50 lives. According to this method, if the city wall was not touched at the end of the day, the casualties would probably be in the thousands. The war never stopped. Hong Fan sat on the general's stand, forcing himself to look at the casualties occurring under the city. At this moment, their blood had not yet been shed and their bodies were still warm, and they were not yet the figures in the statistics of war losses. As for Su Yanteo, from the moment the military order was issued, his face was nothing but cold as ice. Half an hour later, Yi Hong's first messenger rushed to the general's platform and asked to withdraw and reorganize. Su Yanteo refused coldly. Hong Fan stood up and asked for a fight, but was also persuaded to leave. Time was unbearable. A year and a half ago, the war on the top of Jinhe City was just as tragic as it is now, but more straightforward. In 2 or 3 days, the 2 tribes gave their all, the knife went in and out, and the winner was clear. And what Hong Fan saw at this time can only be described as torture. Every casualty seeped out slowly, as if using flesh and blood to smooth a steel file. He was a little restless in the chair, and turned his head to glance at Su Yanteo. The latter's eyebrows were as hard as iron, as if he didn't notice it. With just one glance, Hong Fan understood what it meant to be kind and commanding an army. The first wave of offensive lasted for an hour. At noon, the generals had mutton soup and held a military meeting again. In a private discussion with Pan Rui, Hong Fan just learned that in most battlefields in Dahua's history, filling the river was not that troublesome. Anyway, it was a job that mortals could do, and the people could be conscripted on the spot. If it failed in 1 day, it would be 3 days, and if it failed in 3 days, it would be 5 days. If people died, their bodies could also fill the river, which saved the earthwork and greatly consumed the wooden arrows on the city. This was also the tactical style that Su Yanteo was familiar with, which the Xianfeng army had used to suppress the rebels for more than 10 years. But for various reasons, the Beisheng army could not do this. P.S. I have checked a lot of information on medieval sieges in the past few days. After all, people fighting people cannot be fooled like the snake people in the first battle. And the experience of these chapters will also be Hong Fan's precious wealth. He will also lead the army in the future, and he can't learn it by himself. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.